In the year 21XX, Earth was no longer what it used to be. It had become a chaotic wasteland. Tearing through black clouds, an ominous ship skimmed the ruined atmosphere. Focusing on the radar, our protagonist spoke over the radio, reporting that he'd finally found the target. Moments later, the ship dove straight toward the spot marked on the map. Below, the scene was bleak, revealing the ruins of a city that once pulsed with life. In desperation, a survivor ran through the rubble, begging for help. Sobbing, the boy screamed at the top of his lungs, asking if anyone was out there. Suddenly, a massive, burly monster lunged down, shattering the ground right in front of him. Terrified, the boy recoiled as the gruesome creature prepared to snatch him. Worse still, another monster suddenly appeared behind the young man, making him swallow hard and cry out for help. With no way out, the poor lad shouted for anyone who might be listening to come to his aid. Clutching a family photo, all he wanted was a tiny chance to survive. Surrounded by the monsters that had ravaged the world, his fate seemed inevitable. Closing his eyes, the survivor prayed to the heavens for someone to punish these beasts. Just then, a manic beam of light tore through the sky, annihilating the creature the moment it hit the ground. Lying on the ground, the boy heard a calm voice apologizing for being late. Emerging from the smoke, our hero appeared with an imposing air, and the survivor asked who he was. Jin, with jade-green eyes, fell silent for a long moment without answering. This made the youth suddenly tremble, a choked smile breaking across his face. "Ah, right, finally at last. We can reclaim our world now, can't we?" His voice echoed through the quiet space, faint as a breeze skimming water. Jin replied coldly, "Yes, that's right. So rest easy." The young man forced a smile with a dazed look and said, "Thank you very much." "Thank you," and with that, he passed away right in front of Jin. A soft sound echoed shortly afterward. At that, Jin's expression suddenly darkened, his brows knitting in frustration. Just then, a voice suddenly rang out from somewhere. "Jin, you're too late." Seeing the person before him, Jin turned his head coldly and then called out, "Kagura." Kagura adjusted his glasses slightly and replied, "Perhaps he's the last survivor of this land. Give it up. Jin, you need to face this cruel reality." Under Kagura's words, Jin could only bow his head and remain silent. Encouraged, Kagura then asserted firmly that humanity had truly been wiped out. They were born from prolonged environmental pollution, grotesque mutated monsters, and an entire brood of corrupted beings. They possessed a body regeneration capability beyond imagination. Even nuclear weapons couldn't wipe them out. However, we never intended to give up. Instead, we kept running experiments on possible subjects, and finally we found the tool to fight back. But now there's no one left for us to save anymore. "Right," Kagura said, sighing helplessly. He watched the last person on Earth disappear, accompanied by a voice that echoed, "We really were too late." Jin forced himself to retort, "There's still something worth protecting." At this, Kagura was highly suspicious. "You actually believe there are survivors out there?" Jin brushed past him like a breeze and replied softly, "Not exactly." With a smile, Jin asserted confidently, "But in the future, the nanomachines you've painstakingly created can heal the environment, right?" Kagura answered, "Yes." Hearing that, Jin continued his analysis. That army of nanos won't just eliminate the corrupted one's regenerative abilities. They will also trigger a process of revival for this planet. And then one day, this planet will recover its original beauty. And at that moment, a new civilization will surely arise again, just as humanity once did. After listening to Jin for a while, Kagura couldn't help but be incredulous. "Sounds like a far-fetched fairy tale." Jin calmly explained, "That's enough for me. Maybe just that tiny spark of hope is more than enough. In Jin's mind, the power I hold may become necessary in the future. Believing in that maybe might just be the key to saving the whole future." After staring at Jin lying in the experimental capsule for a while, Kagura turned to leave with the faintest optimism left. "If we can pass that chance on to the next generation, that's enough." At that moment, a voice suddenly echoed from somewhere. "The hibernation system has been activated." While the monsters were wreaking havoc across Earth, the system's voice grew louder and louder. 5, 20, 153, 376, 974, 1384, 5180, 8492, 17,987. According to the system's numbers, Earth was gradually restoring itself. Meanwhile, the monsters were losing vitality. The numbers kept rising: 32,416, 56,428, 84,524. As the sun climbed higher and life began to sprout, when birds soared through the wide skies, it marked the moment the monsters were slowly dying out. 184,236, 246,578, 306,938, 562,487, 847,527. With numbers climbing, Earth was steadily turning green again. Cute rabbits, horses calmly grazing, scenes Earth hadn't seen in ages. Meanwhile, the numbers continued to climb. 3,842,350, 5,254,690, 7,550,192, 14,250,785, 25,402,437, 45,756,249. 89,524,250. When Earth once again faced the sun with clear blue beaches and white sands, that was a story 100 million years later. The system announcement rang out. Access code confirmed, initiating hibernation release procedure. Footsteps pounded in urgent haste. Hakuma's face was now dotted with sweat. The girl's whole family was fleeing under attack from a red-eyed monster. In this life-or-death moment, Danpo ran behind, crying and helplessly shouting, "Is he really in a place like this?" Hakuma affirmed decisively, "Definitely yes." Shandy quickly chimed in helplessly, "But if he's not here, we're as good as dead." At that, Hakuma spoke up, "He really is here." As soon as she finished speaking, the girl gripped her necklace tightly. A moment later, Hakuma's eyes widened and with solemnity she said, "The guardian god is definitely present in this place." Saying that, Hakuma and the others ran straight toward the old power door ahead. They frantically pushed the door open and rushed inside. Seeing there was no escape, Danpo announced in despair, "Hey, look, it's a dead end ahead." At that, even Hakuma's face darkened. She was too panicked to speak. Meanwhile, the gigantic savage monster was closing in. This only made Shandy more terrified. What do we do now? While her two friends crouched down awaiting their fate, Hakuma still had a sliver of hope and begged, "Please save us." Screaming, tears welling, she cried out, "Please save us, O guardian god." No sooner had Hakuma finished than the experimental capsule shattered, and in an instant a voice rang out. Request received. A surge of maximal energy shot straight at the monster, stunning Hakuma and the others. With a single strike, the beast was obliterated. Hakuma and her group were startled by the turn of events, while an unfamiliar voice continued from afar. "Told you that faith was worthwhile, didn't I?" A figure slowly emerged from the lab. It was none other than Jin. He'd been in hibernation for 100 million years waiting for this day. With a smile, Jin declared clearly, "Believe in the infinite possibilities of the future." Opening the storage box, Jin said, "The storage unit Kagura made is truly powerful. My outfit is still exactly as it was at the start." Looking at the computer screen, he showed visible disbelief. But is this really the world 100 million years later? Most of the stored data had been severely damaged. It was surprising the shelter had held up until now, perhaps all thanks to the presence of nanoparticles in the air. The syringe on the table is the device for injecting nanoagents. Holding the small box, Jin pondered that he really wanted to learn what had happened to the planet. But Kagura left him only this cube-like message. "Oh, but before we go on." Thinking that, Jin, bare-chested, turned to the Hakuma group and asked, "Can you tell me about the current situation?" "Oh my, how rude of me. It seems I've been naked for 100 million years, hasn't it?" The more he talked, the more Hakuma and the others gaped in disbelief. One of them gently put gloves back on and continued, "Well, that's better now. You should look presentable, right?" No sooner had they spoken than Jin donned the exact same clothes from 100 million years ago. After countless centuries sealed away, the secret chamber door was finally greeted by sunlight. Jin's group slowly stepped out, and upon seeing the scene before them, Jin's face turned to stunned amazement. Looking at the lush landscape with rolling mountains and a long, winding canal, Jin could hardly believe his eyes. So this is the world after that endless 100 million years. It bears no trace of the era I knew. Seeing him still dazed, Hakuma beside him immediately tugged his sleeve and called, "Oh, guardian god, please follow this way, stay close to us." With that, she pointed toward Danpo and the others walking ahead. Seeing that, Jin immediately took notice. He couldn't help but be suspicious of the people before him. Humans? No way. Humanity should have gone extinct ages ago, right? Could they have evolved into human-like forms over that vast stretch of time? The more he thought, the more he tried to guess Danpo and Shandy's appearances. Koala and cat, perhaps. While Hakuma stared at Jin with a puzzled face, he remained lost in thought. It's quite possible they've been influenced by nanoparticles. The fact they're still using the same language from 100 million years ago is the clearest proof. With that thought, Jin smiled and introduced himself. "Ah, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Jin Shido, just call me Jin." "All right," upon hearing this, Hakuma replied. "I'm Hakuma Phil, you can just call me Hakuma." Nearby, Danpo and Shandy didn't interrupt. I'm Danpo, I'm Shandy. After listening, Jin couldn't help but ask, "So what now? What do you want me to do?" Pulling him along, Hakama explained, "We're almost there. I hope you can defeat the invader out there." This made Jin full of questions. An invader. While the two were talking, Shandy suddenly went pale. The boy trembled in panic and screamed. Seeing the village engulfed in smoke and flame, Shandy and Danpo were stunned. "Our village." No sooner had he said that than Shandy couldn't contain himself and ran forward shouting, "Dad! Mom!" Hakama hurriedly tried to stop him from behind. "Wait, don't run so fast." Under the circumstances, Jin just stood there, silently observing. Everything seemed to be conjecture to him. Wooden barricades and rows of houses were also built from wood. It seemed their level of civilization hadn't advanced much. With that thought, Jin followed Hakama's group deeper into the burning village. At the sight before them, Hakama's face went pale. In an instant, she shouted, "Grandma!" Her grandmother, who was also the village chief, was facing off against a huge monster. Seeing Hakama, she anxiously called out, "Hakama, is that you? Why are you back here at a time like this?" Looking at the monster before him, Jin coldly thought to himself, "Is that the invader everyone's been talking about?" It looked no different from a corrupted beast. Do people in this era really call them invaders? The village chief, powerless, advised, "Leave this area immediately." Hakama paid him no heed. She unleashed her power and declared firmly, "I'm not leaving, I'll stay to help you." Seeing the energy flowing within her, Jin was slightly startled and thought, "This reaction means it's time I put it to the test." With that thought, he quickly charged forward, and with a single strike, Jin easily knocked the monster away. Cradling the village chief, Jin politely offered, "Allow me to step in a bit." In an instant, Hakama seized the opportunity and charged. Seeing her attack the monster with her power, Jin praised enthusiastically, "Nice, go for it." Hakama gathered strength in her palm, then struck straight at the monster. The power detonated quickly, making it reel back in pain a few steps. Only when the monster's corpse lay on the ground could he be certain. Indeed, the microagent regeneration suppression was working. The corrupted creature's cells showed no sign of recovery. That girl could manipulate the nanoparticles in the atmosphere. Usually only those with a compatible constitution can do that. But, as he pondered, he wondered, can anyone in this era make that fireball? At his question, the village chief looked a bit puzzled. "What do you mean by this era?" Still, she answered Jin. "No, only a few people can do that. Those are people who possess divine power. Counting myself, there are only 4 of them in this village." This surprised Jin. Divine power? A moment later he thought, so that's how they refer to the energy that controls nanoparticles. At that moment, Hakama suddenly ran to the village chief, asking with a worried face, "Grandma, where did everyone in the village go?" The chief gently replied, "I evacuated them all. But more importantly, why did you kids come back here?" As she said that, she frowned in despair. "This village is basically finished. The monster from earlier was actually just a newly hatched juvenile. We are utterly powerless against truly mature ones. Before long, a swarm of young monsters will surge in and wipe this whole village out." No sooner had her lament ended than another voice rang out. "Grandma, could you tone down the cowardice a bit?" At the sight of the speaker, the village chief called, "Sarlis." Meanwhile, Sarlis calmly said, "Those invaders are nothing. I'll tear them all apart." The chief worriedly asked, "Where did you take the villagers?" Sarlis replied, "I personally led them all to the shelter." Hakama walked over calmly and gently called, "Father." Seeing his daughter, Hakama's father smiled, puzzled. "Hakama, I was frantic when I couldn't find you in the shelter. Where on earth did you go?" Hakama answered clearly, "I went to the sealed door." At her reply, the village chief was naturally alarmed. "Hakama, you're brave. How dare you step into that forbidden place?" Hakama replied, trembling with fear. "Grandma once told me that our guardian god sleeps behind that door, and if the village is in grave peril, he will appear to save us." Hearing this, the chief immediately followed Hakama's gaze and looked at Jin with curiosity. "Is it this person? He doesn't look much like a god at all." Cutting her off, Sarlis sneered and mocked. "Huh, spare me. This low species as a guardian god? Don't make me laugh." Upon hearing this, Jin frowned in annoyance and retorted, "Low species." Shandy tried to step forward and explain. Sir, this really is our guardian god." The more Sarlis heard, the more confused he became. "What? You wondered where she went? Turns out she went with Hakama." As soon as he finished, Sarlis approached Jin and with a contemptuous tone said, "Look at his ears. He's just a lowly being with no animal tribe features whatsoever. He probably just happened to be wandering there and you all mistook him." Hearing Sarlis's analysis, Shandy hurriedly countered, "No, we weren't mistaken. He personally defeated an invader." Sarlis laughed excitedly. "You mean that juvenile from earlier? I could have finished it with one strike. As he said this, he didn't bother to hide his blade, pointing it directly at Jin and coldly threatening. Listen up. This is our village's internal matter. We don't need some lowly outsider meddling in it. That's what I mean. Don't interfere with nonsense. No sooner had he finished speaking than Sarlis swept past Jin like a gust of wind. Seeing him leave, Hakuma's father couldn't help but ask. Wait, Sarlis, where are you going? Sarlis answered. Isn't it obvious? I'm going to wipe out that giant monster, and you lot can stay here trembling. Sarlis said with a tone and expression full of contempt. This left the village chief utterly helpless, immediately warning. You fool, you'd still be alive if you ran away right now. Under the circumstances, Jin simply stood silent and watched the show. The village chief stepped closer to him and spoke sternly. Fine, I don't know who you are, but thank you for helping the kids. If you don't mind, please lead these children to the shelter with my son, will you? I must go after Sarlis to stop him and take one last gamble. At this, Hakuma cried out anxiously, Grandma. Jin didn't even bother with the request, coldly replying in a way that made the chief falter. I refuse. I have my pride. I can't just stand by and let him call me a low species forever. Let him go and offer himself up. With firm tone, Jin then walked off crisply, leaving everyone stunned. As dusk fell, the alpha monster appeared outside, massive and clad in hard scales. It slowly took step after step forward. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared, accompanied by a shouted voice. Hey, you beast! With a spear in hand, Sarlis unleashed his power and declared confidently, I am the one who will shoulder this nation's fate. A warrior destined to become a holy knight. You're just an invader creature at this level, are you? I'll show you I can take you down without anyone's help. With that, Sarlis, crackling with lightning power, charged at the alpha. This, of course, caught the attention of the juveniles. Immediately, they all steeled themselves and lunged straight at Sarlis. With a short, precise slash, he easily defeated them, which only boosted his confidence. Sarlis shouted, You're blocking my way. This single strike of mine is enough to finish you. Saying that, Sarlis charged straight at the alpha. Then he leapt high and declared, Take this. In an instant, Sarlis slashed decisively across the big one's body. Blood quickly gushed out, which somewhat exhilarated Sarlis. The alpha screamed in pain, yet very quickly, it regenerated its wound. In the current situation, Sarlis was astonished, thinking, Are the bites on its body healing themselves? While he was lost in his thoughts, the monster advanced and attacked before he realized it. In an instant, desperate screams rang out. Despite that, Sarlis remained unscathed. He opened his eyes in puzzlement. It was Jin. He had appeared with his power and saved Sarlis's life. Jin sneered, Have you finished your little performance yet? At the sight of him, Sarlis stammered, You. Before he could finish, he had to dodge an attack from the little ones. Watching them, Sarlis wondered, These creatures can still move. Meanwhile, Jin subtly moved his hand, and a moment later he snapped his fingers, and in an instant the juveniles were taken out by a single move. In the current situation, Sarlis was thoroughly bewildered. He looked at the fallen young monster and asked, What on earth is happening? Just then, a voice called from afar, Grandma, run this way, hurry up. It was Hakuma's group. Upon seeing Sarlis, they panicked and shouted, Sarlis. However, as soon as those words ended, the village chief and Hakuma's father were dumbstruck by the scene unfolding before them. The village chief gaped and thought to herself, What the hell is happening before my eyes? What a terrifying sight is this? A giant, massive figure like that can be stopped with just one hand. Jin suddenly said, It's starting to feel heavier, everyone fall back for now. At his reminder, Sarlis was puzzled. Huh. Jin said no more and just pulled him away. As expected, the monster lunged at them. This left Sarlis even more astonished. After being saved by Jin, he blurted out, What the hell are you? Jin replied calmly, Those creatures can regenerate instantly no matter how much damage you deal. That's why we have to use nanoparticles to lock down their regenerative ability. The more he heard, the more puzzled Sarlis became. Nanoparticles? Jin stood up leisurely and explained further. That's what you lot call divine power. Your attack just now wasn't bad. Shame it was too shallow to trigger the anti-regeneration effect. Hearing this, Sarlis asked, bewildered, Are you really the guardian god from the legends? Jin replied nonchalantly, I'm no god, but there's one thing I need to make clear to you. You insisted this was the village's private matter, right? Sarlis stammered in agreement. Yes, that's right. That's why I didn't let him finish speaking, Jin interjected. You're gravely mistaken. This is actually my matter. At this moment, the monster quickly returned to full vigor and attacked straight at him. Jin, with his nimble body, easily dodged every strike. Watching closely, he calculated inwardly. First, I'll lock down all its movements. With that thought, he flicked his fingers, and a small tentacle suddenly exploded. In moments, it spread all over the creature, causing it to scream in agony. While Sarlis gaped at the scene, Jin continued. These abominations are monsters born from our own stupidity. Because of that, someone who survived from 100 million-year-old era like me has the responsibility to personally end this mess. As he finished speaking, Jin gathered lightning power in his hands, ready to strike. This made Sarlis even more incredulous and skeptical. I don't really understand everything you're saying, but can you actually do it? Jin replied firmly. Definitely, because I'm a product born from human civilization, carrying a blood-soaked history of countless long, endless days, filled with brutality and tragic suffering, the last surviving human being. And at that moment, Jin unleashed his mighty power toward the monster, causing the surrounding water to ripple as if boiling. The monster opened its gigantic maw wide and took Jin's blow head-on. A horrifying scene followed. With a single move, he effortlessly annihilated the creature. The sight naturally left Hakuma's people utterly stunned. Everyone stared, mouths agape in amazement. Hakuma even broke into a bright, excited smile. Jin's immense power far exceeded ordinary imagination, blasting straight through Earth's atmosphere. After his strike, the monster was finally defeated. Sarlis was frightened out of his wits, drenched in sweat with an unbelievable panic on his face. Meanwhile, Jin remained calm and asserted, "That advanced scientific weapon." As he finished speaking, a faint smile appeared on his lips. Not far from Jin, a rustling sound suddenly came from the underbrush. The girl hiding in the bushes had witnessed everything and was filled with stunned astonishment. I came here to investigate the invading creature that appeared near Kodama village, but instead I just saw an unbelievable scene with my own eyes. What was that power just now? Even the Captain Knight in the royal city might not pull that off. This is serious. I need to rush back to the capital immediately to report everything to the guild master. With that thought, the girl with the magnifying glass grinned excitedly. When night fell, a voice echoed from a corner of the forest. "Can you hear me? Jin, if you're listening to this, then I probably no longer exist in this world." Kagura chuckled smugly. "I've always wanted to deliver a classic movie line like that. So how does the future world look to you now? The global environment must have improved a lot, right? However, there's still a problem." Jin repeated doubtfully. "A problem?" Kagura didn't beat around the bush. "I'll get straight to the point. Even if the ecosystem recovers, the corrupted beasts won't be completely eradicated." Jin narrowed his eyes slightly. At that moment, Kagura realized, "I've started to notice something off. About a millennium after you entered hibernation, I also had to undergo periodic hibernation to directly observe the world's changes. Thanks to nature's rebirth, the number of corrupted ones has clearly decreased. When the satellite widened its view to the red spot, however, it clearly captured a bizarre humanoid figure and a black steed destroying things. That person was brimming with murderous intent. He quickly detected the screen going dark. Kagura grew increasingly worried. With changing natural conditions, the evolved variants of the corrupted are beginning to emerge. I'm not sure which direction they'll mutate, but they'll definitely become an unpredictable scourge. All I could do then was prepare the newly born seedlings, so they'd have at least some chance of standing up to those monsters. And at the same time, leave a reserve source of power just for you." At that, Jin unconsciously slipped his hand into his pocket. "Power." He held the syringe, unable to hide his doubt. "You mean this thing in front of me?" Kagura's voice chimed on. "Just activate it, and the nanoparticles will automatically guide you on how to operate it. Through the process of enhancing the human body, you are the only individual perfectly compatible with the nano and able to wield this power." After the injection, the thing in Jin's hand vanished, leaving him slightly empty-handed. Suddenly, a dagger appeared in the palm of his hand. Jin began to suspect. So this is the ability to create materials by restructuring the shape of nanoparticulates. This thing is actually pretty handy. Kagura proudly added, "I've hidden similar upgrade energy sources in secret research facilities scattered across the planet. I didn't keep them all in one place to hedge risks. If they fell into the hands of the corrupted, it would prevent everything from being destroyed at once. And because I wanted you personally to go explore the vast world out there." Kagura said honestly, "I can't predict how dangerous the corrupted will become in the distant future. That said, compared to the ruined world of the past, things must be much better now." Nearby, Agus stopped his horse when he heard a strange sound. "Is that hurried footsteps?" The rider was the brown-haired girl. Thanks to the peace, the town had long since fallen into deep sleep. Somewhere, candles still flickered over late-night readers. Kagura smiled to reassure Jin. "So for now, just enjoy this new world a bit." The screen then glitched, leaving behind an elderly figure. "I won't be able to be by your side to witness that with you in person." Jin couldn't hide the astonishment in his eyes. Old Kagura left his final message. "Everything rests on you, Jin." The box returned to its original form, and Jin fell silent. "I understand." At that moment, two small figures ran over. "Oh, guardian deity." Hakama greeted him joyfully. "So you're here after all." Danpo, tired, told Jin. "Everyone's been frantically looking for you." Both clung to his hands, pleading, "Please come back quickly. The party can't start without the guest of honor." Jin froze up a little, what he had just seen hanging around Hakama's neck. "Is this the access key to the research institute?" Letting himself be pulled, Jin asked the girl. "Hakama, where did you get that pendant?" Hakama touched the key, puzzled. "This one." She answered honestly. "My family received it from a great figure long ago. It's a talisman passed down through many generations. They say if the village falls into danger, this will guide the guardian deity to come protect us." Jin smiled gently at the news. "So that's why she could get inside. It seems I owe them quite a favor." In the village around the bonfire, everyone happily gathered together. They all looked up at the flurry of sounds. "This way, hurry up." They all shared the same question. "Is that person really the guardian deity from the rumors?" They couldn't help but appraise him from head to toe. "Are you kidding me? No matter how you look at him, he's just a lowly fellow." The man kept taunting, unaware Sarlis was losing his temper. "That scrawny guy actually defeated that monster." Jin quickly spotted the group. Before Sarlis could do anything, he slapped the loudmouth in the face. "What would you know while you were running for your life?" Shandy awkwardly asked the other. "Are you all right? We're truly sorry for our rudeness." Sarlis loudly proclaimed, "Our god, the guardian deity, is truly extraordinary." Hakama, surprised, flipped her attitude 180 degrees. Thankfully, this eased Danpo. He seemed like a different person than this afternoon. The village chief cheerfully stepped forward from behind. "So you're here after all." Jin greeted politely. "Respectfully, village chief." She carefully sought his opinion. "Allow me, on behalf of the villagers, to say this once more. We offer you our deepest thanks." The man beside her was also deeply grateful. "If you hadn't appeared in time, our entire village would surely have been wiped out. We would very much like to repay this favor." Jin merely smiled wryly. "Don't worry about it." The man still wanted to give thanks, but Jin bluntly said, "If you truly insist, I don't need material rewards. What I need right now is information. I want to know in detail about the current state of this world." He was stunned for a few seconds by this odd request. "The state of the whole world," the village chief suggested to Jin. "If that's the case, you should make a trip to the royal city." The name was somewhat unfamiliar to Jin. The royal city. The village chief explained that it's where the king resides, ruling the kingdom of Kermosia. People from all over gather there, so they would surely have the latest news about the outside world. We, the people of Kodama village, also frequently go there to trade our specialty silk from the deep woods. The village chief nodded at Jin. "The road ahead is long and full of danger, but I believe with the guardian deity's power it will be fine." However, for Jin there was one problem. "But I don't know the way." She patted the girl beside her on the head and instructed, "Let Hakama go with him as a guide. She has business to attend to in the capital anyway." Jin was curious. Personal business. The village chief didn't hide it. "Surely you've seen it yourself. The guardian deity child can use divine power. In the royal city, there's an academy that trains and helps people develop such holy abilities. We had considered giving up because of recent upheavals, but I still hope she can enroll as originally planned." Jin suddenly realized a bit more. Schools still exist in this era after all. Then another voice cut in. "Wait, everyone hold on." Sarlis confidently volunteered. "I'm the one more worthy to guide the guardian deity." The village chief was puzzled. "You have no business in the royal city." Sarlis insisted, nose in the air. "I do. I intend to join the ranks of the holy knights in the capital." The village chief could only sigh. "You couldn't even pass the academy exam, let alone get in." Sarlis' tail stepped on and furious snapped. "Old woman, what did you just say?" Jin cut in with a question. "Isn't divine power enough to be admitted?" Hakama immediately reminded him. "You also have to pass a written exam." Sarlis was originally a fool, so he failed the exam. Amid the noisy arguing, Jin finally understood. He considered seriously. "A holy knight? Sounds interesting. I'm starting to get curious." Elsewhere, Agus had just received the report. "A giant invading monster appeared at Kodama village, and it's already been defeated," the girl confirmed firmly. "Absolutely correct, sir." Still, he asked again. "Everything you said is true, right?" the girl hurriedly affirmed. "I swear it's true, sir. I'm actually on my way back to report this to the guildmaster." This information left Argus silent. "I thought no one but a holy knight could take it down, so I came on my own without waiting for the guild. I didn't expect someone else had already handled it." The girl exclaimed with joy, not noticing a foot drawing near. "Honestly, who would have thought you'd meet a holy knight out in a place this remote? What a coincidence." A monster suddenly lunged out as if to snatch her. Argus reflexively finished off the monster, much to the girl's terror. What had just appeared convinced him even more. If what you say is true, then this is really interesting. Anticipation swelled in Argus. I'm starting to get excited to meet that person myself. The sun rose higher, its gentle light bringing a fresh, peaceful morning to Kodama village. Jin stepped outside and admired the warm scene, exclaiming, "What a fine morning! The air is so fresh and pleasant." Before him were verdant mountains and birds soaring high. Jin couldn't believe he'd lived to see such a sight. He raised a hand to shield his eyes and sighed a little. "I wish Kaguya could see this with me." Suddenly Shandy appeared from behind carrying clothes. "My lord, guardian deity." The boy, seeing him bare as a newborn, offered, "Please put these clothes on, sir." The time had come to bid Jin farewell and send him out of the village. The village chief and several others gathered around Hakama. She looked at the girl and instructed, "Hakama, remember to do a good job guiding him." The girl politely replied, "I understand, ma'am." Sarlas turned away, annoyed, saying, "I used to think I'd learned so much by being near the guardian deity." The village chief sighed, "First you need to focus on your studies." He snapped back, "Shut up." Seeing this, Jin spoke up to encourage him. "You're Sarlas, right? Your movement techniques yesterday weren't bad at all." Sarlas's face flushed in surprise when Jin said, "I'll wait for you at the royal capital." Hearing that, he burst out excitedly, "I'll definitely come. I'll study my hardest." Meanwhile, despite the shouting behind them, Hakama's father stepped forward to shake Jin's hand and entrusted, "Guardian deity, please take care of Hakama for me." He then bent and placed his hand on the girl's small shoulder, saying, "Hakama, just stay healthy, that's all." The girl replied, "Yes, sir." After the farewells, he and Hakama waved. "Well then, I'm off." The two, one grown, one small, set out together. They walked along the stream beside them. The sky began to blush pink. Jin stopped at the waterfall ahead so Hakama could drink. They continued on. As the sun slipped behind the mountain pass, the sky glowed warm pink. Hakama excitedly pointed ahead. Night fell and they sat by a campfire to rest. Jin asked, "How far to the royal capital from here?" Hakama, chewing a piece of cake, replied, "We still have about 4 days of walking." He was somewhat pleased and said, "Closer than I expected." The girl hesitated and called out, "Hey, guardian deity." Jin replied, "Yes." Hakama asked curiously, "Why do you want to learn so much about this world?" He put on a mysterious air and answered, "That's a secret." The girl wondered, "Another secret?" That question left Jin staring off, lost in thought. The corrupted ones hadn't been wiped out. Those were Kaguya's words. Thinking back on the past made him more certain. It was true. The corrupted still existed in this era. He sank deeper into those thoughts. Usually they only thrive in heavily polluted environments. But that place. He stared into the blazing fire and murmured to himself, "Some kind of change is definitely happening." Seeing Jin silent, Hakama grew worried and cut into his thoughts. "Guardian deity, you look scary right now." He replied, "Sorry, I'm just lost in thought." Jin looked intently at the girl and thought, "At least there are still people living in this age, people not under the corrupted's control." Hakama tilted her head, puzzled at Jin's calculating gaze. "First, I need to learn how people today deal with the corrupted. As for the corrupted themselves, I can study them gradually later." Hakama asked, "By the way, what should I call you?" He answered, "Just call me Jin." The girl started, "Lord Jin." He cut her off, "No need for the Lord." The girl obediently called Jin. Suddenly, someone came riding in from afar. The two heard the sound and reflexively turned their heads. The newcomer hurriedly said, "Sorry to disturb your rest." He and two riders behind him approached and asked, "May I have a few minutes?" The man's face looked solemn as he regarded them. Jin asked in confusion, "Who are you?" Argus glanced down at him and introduced himself. "We're from the Holy Cavalry of the Royal Capital. I'm the captain of Detachment 7, Argus Ulton." He blurted, "Holy Cavalry," wondering inwardly if this was the same person mentioned earlier. Suddenly, Karina clenched her teeth in annoyance. She shouted, "Hey, what's your attitude facing our captain? At least stand up and salute." Then she turned to Argus dismounting and declared, "What a rude one. Captain, it's definitely them." He cut her off. "That's enough, Karina." Argus stepped before Jin and offered his hand. "Please forgive me speaking from horseback. Would you mind talking with me for a moment?" Jin stood up curious and asked, "What did she mean by 'it's definitely them' earlier?" Argus didn't answer that but said, "On behalf of my subordinates, I apologize for their rudeness." But Argus interrogated, "First, I need you to answer some questions. Where did you two come from? Where are you headed next?" Hakama, chewing a cake, honestly replied, "We came from Kodama village and are on our way to the royal capital." He frowned, wondering, "From Kodama village?" Hearing that, Karina gave a strange smile. She leapt from her horse and affirmed, I'm still convinced it's them. Karina gripped her sword fiercely, full of fury, and shouted, "There's no birth record mentioning a lowly race in Kodama village. It's all been exposed now, you low-class scum." Hearing that, Jin showed surprise and thought, so they even have birth records here. This country keeps pretty strict tabs, huh? Suddenly, Argus cut through that momentum with, "No." The remark made the girl pause, huh? He looked at Hakama and explained, "The outfit that girl is wearing is a specialty of the Kodama region. It's Kodama silk. Even in the capital, it's sold at high prices because it's considered extremely fine clothing." With that assessment, Argus grew more certain and stated, "Kodama silk made for children is exceedingly rare on the market, so the girl being from Kodama village is likely true." Karina was flustered by this, but he suddenly drew his sword as if to make a point. However, the sword he pointed straight at Jin and declared, "You, on the other hand, are completely different." Argus eyed Jin's clothes and assessed, "The garments you're wearing look very strange. Which country are they from?" He mentioned that along the route from Kodama village to the royal capital, there had been repeated robberies by bandit gangs who exploited children to steal goods. Argus's gaze hardened with his inference. "Sounds a lot like your situation. They often operate by pretending to be innocent." Hearing this, Hakama panicked and protested loudly. "It wasn't us," he replied coldly. "That judgment will be up to us." The girl clenched her teeth, worried about the current situation. Having resolved herself, Hakama began to manifest her divine power. Argus, sensing her intent, frowned. He made glowing swords appear around Hakama and shouted, "Don't try anything here." The girl frowned, struggling with her predicament. Argus, surprised, remarked, "I didn't expect you to possess divine power. You seem quite promising." Jin quietly observed Hakama's form and thought, so she really is a holy knight. Seeing the pressure he displayed, Jin had to admit to himself, "I see he's indeed very strong." Argus continued in that tone, demanding, "Answer me now. Where exactly did you come from? Your testimony will decide." Then he threatened he would decide whether to chop your head off right here. Jin remained silent. His face darkened at the unpleasant words. Argus pointed the tip of his sword at Jin and demanded, "Answer me quickly. Where are you really from? What you say?" He frowned, staring at him. "Never drop your guard for a moment. I'll decide whether your head stays or goes." Despite the threat, Jin was unmoved and stubbornly kept silent. His face turned grim, his gaze cold as a blade. Argus's demeanor was no less fierce, his eyes unwaveringly fixed on his opponent. Faced with his relentless resolve, Jin sighed in helplessness. "I come from Kodama village." At the sound of that name, Karina behind Argus snapped. "What? That's obviously a lie." Despite the girl's doubts, he chose to believe the statement and returned his sword to his side. "I understand." This puzzled the girl. "Wait, Captain." Argus asked Hakama, who stood before him, to verify the information. "You're not lying, are you?" The girl confirmed firmly. "Jin truly is the guardian deity of our Kodama village." He was a bit startled to hear this. Guardian deity, but did not press further. "I see." Watching Argus prepare to leave, Jin was a bit surprised. "Are your questions finished?" "Yes." He leapt onto his horse, looking apologetic. "I still have things to take care of. Please forgive my earlier rudeness." But Karina wasn't letting Jin off that easily. She yelled, "Oh, Captain." Ignoring her shouting, Argus asked Jin, "Are you also heading toward the capital?" "Yes." "I see. Then we'll surely cross paths again." He offered goodwill. "If you run into trouble later, come find me. Consider it my apology for today's incident." Karina yelled again. Argus rode off. "Then excuse me for disturbing you." The girl was stunned and confused by his action. "What? Are you serious?" She called after the captain. "Wait for me." Jin watched them leave and could only smile wryly. Scene shifts. Argus's unit was moving toward the capital. Karina kept questioning the earlier choice. "Why did you withdraw like that?" She flailed her arms and legs at him. "No matter how you look at it, that lowborn is extremely suspicious." Argus remained silent, lost in thought. "A lowborn, huh?" Only then did he speak. "I'm wondering who the weaker party really is." Karina was puzzled by Argus's words. "What do you mean?" Ria, riding beside them, agreed. "That's right." This made Karina even more confused. "Even you think so, Senior Ria?" She tilted her head slightly at Karina. "You didn't notice that?" Ria recalled how overwhelming Jin's power had felt. "An enormous gap in strength between us and that man." Argus continued, his face darkening. "I tried to strike 2 or 3 times to test him, but," he remembered, pointing his sword at Jin. The blade in Argus's hand couldn't move at all. Jin casually slipped his hands into his pockets, used his power to stop the sword. The outcome of that clash was decided before it began. He countered before I could so much as move. Ria looked at Argus with concern. "Captain, you used divine power." "Yes." His admission startled Karina. "I couldn't even activate mine. At the time, I planned to use the same trick as with Hakama." I intended to borrow power similarly, but the spirits refused to lend me their strength. Ria had to admit, I was in the same situation. Only now did Karina belatedly realize that means. Argus added, it also means there's an enormous gap in divine power between the two to pull off such a feat. His expression turned grave as he grasped the severity. Even among this entire cavalry, perhaps only the Grand Commander could match him. Karina and Ria both flinched at this. The girl gritted her teeth. I blame myself a bit for not sensing anything. Argus sympathized fully. It's simply because that person is an abnormal existence. Besides, you just joined the unit. People buzzed, so the one who defeated the invading monster is that guy. Very likely. Karina still felt uneasy. Are we just going to let them leave so easily? Isn't that too dangerous? Argus, helpless, said. I don't know their identity, but they don't seem hostile. For now, let's quietly observe them. Putting that aside, he turned and reminded everyone. Now back to the capital. We've finished dealing with the invading monster earlier than expected, but we can't be away any longer. I'll hand the bandit matter over to the guild. Understood, sir. Ria turned to admonish Karina after today's events. You should focus on building your character, not just obsessing over power. Argus rode ahead, still pondering, the guardian deity of Kodama village. While he thought, his unit had quietly neared the capital. If that person became our ally, Argus wanted to seize the opportunity. They could be the key to solving the kingdom's toughest problems. Scene change, Jin and Hakama were also marching toward the capital. He sighed. Yesterday was quite an interesting encounter. He wondered, do all knights in the capital really have fearsome power like them? The girl denied it. No, they're exceptional cases. Hakama could immediately recognize them, holy knights. They are an elite group carefully selected from the best of the cavalry, and those two were among the finest. In that elite corps, she kept praising their strength and the speed at which they summoned spirits. No, their spirit arts were on a completely different level. Jin was a bit puzzled. Spirit arts, Hakama explained. It's the art of summoning elemental spirits and borrowing power from them. He nodded, I see. They call nanoparticles spirits, do they? He walked on, musing. In this era, science almost feels like fantasy. Suddenly, Jin remembered Karina furiously pointing her sword at him and yelling, you lowborn trash. He sighed, and this whole lowborn race thing helped him deduce. It seems countless races exist in this era, doesn't it? Yes, sir. Hakama described some common races. Some look exactly like fish, others take insect forms. Jin, surprised, insects. She explained the reason further. My grandmother used to say it was because habitats shrank long ago. That caused races to develop different appearances. Bodies gradually changed to adapt to where they live. Jin was very surprised by this new information. Evolution driven by environmental pressure. He fell into thought. So that means there were survivors from 100 million years ago, and humans back then evolved into these forms. Thinking more wouldn't solve anything. Jin finally understood why he was scorned. So those who didn't evolve are called lowborn? Yes. Hakama knew the world well. That was why society looked down on the lowborn, those who didn't adapt to the environment, because they were considered backwards. She added more about this world. Most people sold into slavery are from lowborn races. Jin gritted his teeth hearing this, so slavery still exists here. Hakama was equally indignant about the discrimination. But in reality, there's no big difference. They're just a little different from the majority, yet they're treated so badly. She was furious. It's completely wrong. Jin smiled and praised her. You're a good kid. Suddenly, a man with a cane stepped out to block their path. His voice was hoarse and exhausted, begging for help. Help me. Then he collapsed. Hakama rushed over, worried. Are you okay? She quickly ran to him. Those ears. Jin also leaned in slowly to take a closer look. He lay collapsed on the ground, gasping, breath heavy. His body covered in wounds and bruises. His ears were completely human-looking, with no mutation at all. Those ears were peculiar. He lay on the dirt, filthy, panting. Jin stood there, hand on his chin, observing and thinking, bruises all over. These injuries are really severe. Hakama sat beside him and slowly helped him sit up. Are you okay? Jin reached out a hand and used his power. Hold on a bit, I'll heal your wounds right now. Suddenly something flashed in his eyes. He sat very still and listened as the boy spoke. Don't move, absolutely. One of the boy's hands held a knife. The other clutched the girl's throat in threat. If you so much as move, I'll kill this girl immediately. The three of them were shoved into this terrifying standoff. Jin calmly looked down and thought, so that's it. He looked at the boy who was gritting his teeth and pointing the knife at Hakama. We've walked right into your trap. His gaze flicked elsewhere, thinking, that means those others are lurking nearby. In the distance, a shadowy man stepped forward. Apparently someone was indeed capable of coordinating with her. This man appeared with a long beard. You did a fine job, Poweru. Another man appeared with his underlings behind him. You followed orders exceptionally well. In Jin's mind, a thought formed. Its camouflage invisibility tech. The image of a shadow with arrows pointing at it popped into his head. It worked by capturing images of the surrounding environment and using micro-nanoparticles to render the user invisible. He stood before them composed, thinking, the sole weakness is that movement reveals the camouflage, but they've operated it extremely skillfully. Meanwhile, the other guy still had his sword pointed at his face, a low-born creature like you sure dresses sharp. What country are you from? The sword pressed closer to Jin's neck. Stay calm, don't be stupid, and move. Hakama tried to break free and shouted. Lord Jin, the man taunted, you know what happens if you act rashly, don't you? Over there, the girl was clutching her stomach with her power. He then shouted loudly, Hakama. Only then did the girl fall into line. Jin finally spoke. That kind of power isn't meant to be used on people. You realize that, right? The girl frantically screamed, terrified. But the man still pointed his sword at him, but had turned his head. We've hit the jackpot, boss. Can't believe that kid actually has divine power. A companion standing beside him. You can use it too, right? He turned and replied, who knows? He snapped angrily, what did you say? Then he kicked Jin hard in the gut. Jin shot up with a pained cry. Lord Jin, the man's boot remained on him, don't get cocky, low-born scum. The man in front warned, be careful not to damage the precious merchandise. He squeezed his eyes and winced. After all, a lowborn fetches little on the market. He continued speaking, but what if they have divine power? There's no way a bunch of lowly ones should wield that kind of power. Hakama thought, these guys. The girl's face filled with fear. She thought, it must be the bandits that the Holy Knight mentioned. The miserable bunch. The man slowly stepped toward the girl with a surge of power in his hand. All right then, take a little nap. The girl also had a thought. If we just let ourselves get caught like this. The powerful hand pressed close to Hakama's face, making her flinch in fear. The two of us will be sold off as slaves. A dark silence drifted slowly by. Jin was right in front of her calling, Hakama, wake up. Hey, Hakama, she answered slowly. Lord Jin. Then she sat up abruptly, terrified. His muscular frame sat beside her. Are you hurt anywhere? She turned and said, I'm fine, more importantly. It turned out they were in iron cages, and there were many victims outside. Where have they locked us up? Jin then turned his face away. This is the lair of the ones who attacked us. Looking at the victims in those iron cages, it seems the other captives were all gathered here. Some bodies in there were little more than skin and bones. A poor blue-haired girl was hugging her frail frame. The two of them sat there full of anxiety. Hakama looked at him. But why are you naked like that? Jin bowed his head and grimaced. They stripped me clean. They thought the clothes were odd. Lucky for me, they left my underpants. The girl sat there dumbfounded. You don't seem bothered by that at all, do you? He looked away. Well, most of my previous life I was naked anyway. The innocent face asked. Put that aside, why didn't you fight back then? With your strength, you could have easily taken them down. Lord Jin. On the other side, the soldier opened the door and entered with the boy from before. Hurry up and finish this. The two of them then turned to look at the filthy boy holding 2 loaves of bread. So you've been awake all this time, huh? Hakama stood up, grabbed the bars, and shouted. The boy sat down and handed her the bread. I don't care if you hate me. Then he casually stood and looked down. Because I never dared hope I'd be forgiven in the first place. Hakama could only grit her teeth and cling to the bars. Jin spoke to get his attention. Truly, how merciful of you. He looked down in alarm. Merciful, he retorted, a proper villain. Sitting there staring at the sky with ambition will never waste time wondering whether he's hated or forgiven, or something like that. Then he slowly stood up, drawing their attention. All right, let's begin. Jin gripped the bars of the cage tightly. This made the boy panic. He stood by the cage he'd easily broken. To the boy's astonishment, Hakama stood behind and dusted her hands. I've patiently waited for you. No one here can eavesdrop on our conversation. He replied, waiting for me. His face showed panic when he heard Jin. Jin, where is the person most important to you being held right now? The boy bent down cautiously. How did you know that? He stepped out slowly with a hand full of power. It was just my guess. The boy fell silent before the power in front of him. From the start, she even fooled me. The bruises on her body were entirely real. He only now stared at the bruises in surprise when Jin mentioned them. Still, even villains wouldn't beat their comrades this savagely just to use them. That's why I saw through it early on. He was astonished by Jin's insight. I realized they were using violence to threaten her into obeying their demands. Then his hands clasped together, trembling with fear, and he slowly spoke. My little brother, he's been taken by them. Recalling how they were torn apart in agony, and my parents, he shouted bitterly. They were both brutally murdered by those bastards. He clutched his shirt as tears fell. so I had to protect my brother's life at any cost. Hakama stood behind, watching him grip his hands as he spoke. That's the only reason I did it. Jin's face turned grim when he heard of their crimes. What scum? The girl beside him looked up. So did you deliberately let the bandits capture them to rescue them later? He replied. That was part of the plan. But he added, evil folk are stubborn and slippery. They're like stubborn grease stains. A puzzled voice asked. Grease stains, the soldier by the door said. If even one gets away, they'll multiply and cause more disasters. Those words made the man look over in surprise. So, if we've decided to wipe them out. At that moment, Jin came up from behind and kicked hard, sending both the door and the man flying. He grabbed hold of the broken doorframe, his hand clenched there, face frightening. We must uproot them with no trace left, purge them thoroughly and mercilessly. When it comes to scum, I know them better than anyone. 100 million years ago, in a bustling infrastructural city, young Jin appeared dirty and grimy. He watched a news clip about the successful capture of a drug kingpin. As for me, I've always yearned to deliver justice. A car stopped behind where he stood on the street. A foot appeared right behind Jin. But I soon realized one thing. He glanced calmly. A world still needs justice. 3 fierce thugs stood there. Really just human scum, and they were breeding everywhere. The leader, cigarette in his mouth, hoisted Jin up. If I could live a normal life, that would be ideal. But his face was poker. Still, the circumstances I grew up in wouldn't allow that to happen. He was still in the man's grip. So, not long after, Jin raised one hand and twisted the man's arm aside. I crushed them. Then he kicked straight into the man's gut, no mercy. To this day, he grew up harsh and destructive toward them. He casually sat atop the pile of bodies he'd defeated. And so I just swept them away. Suddenly, someone stood before him on that mound of bodies. And one day, someone said to me that. The remark made him start and grimace. Kagura now reached out as if to grab him. You were born in the wrong world. Back in the present, Jin was dragging someone, dragging them along the ground. The 2 soldiers ground their teeth and stumbled back, stammering, "Stop right now." Many more soldiers lay sprawled on the ground. What do you even want? He kept asking as more of his men fell. How did you break in all the way here? Jin smiled menacingly. Then he hurled a man flying straight toward them. The man stood there aghast, catching himself in shock. Jin darted forward with swift agility and struck. But the man could only stand frozen, terrified, watching Jin land a face-smashing punch, as a voice called from behind. You bastard, who the hell are you? He crouched on the floor, clutching his comrade in his arms in panic. On the other side, those locked in the iron cages were being released. Kaoru looked visibly worried. That shout was. She hurriedly and anxiously turned and asked, What kind of being is your companion? A god? Hakama turned and calmly answered, He is a guardian deity. Yes, a god. The girl looked up confidently and said, Leave it to Lord Jin. He'll handle it. She looked back as they prepared to leave. For now, just do what Lord Jin said. Get everyone out. Worried thought, can we really escape? She ground her teeth in hatred thinking of him. But that guy has an enormous reserve of holy power. There's no way Jin could beat him with muscle alone. The man sat on the ground in panic. Wait. Jin grabbed another man's head before him. What are you begging for? Money, right? The man laughed nervously. Ah, no. He pointed at the boy sitting in the cage. Or do you want slaves? Looking at that boy, the poor version of him as a child, with the man's words. If so, I'll give you as many as you want. Jin glanced over without saying a word, then shoved him to the ground, spraying out red syrup. Have you said everything you wanted? The man sat sweating, thinking, what the hell is happening here? He stared at Jin in fear, thinking, why is my holy magic useless like this? Jin stepped closer to him in a terrifying way. The man clenched his teeth and thought, what kind of demonic power does he possess? As Jin closed and he said, you're just a half-baked villain. The man listened to him. Real big-time villains run away immediately. Jin frowned and looked down. And the likes of you always spout contempt for your opponents, certain of victory. The next word set him off. Then the moment you taste defeat, you start begging pathetically. He thought, damn. Then the man bolted. If that's the case, I have no other choice. He slammed a switch down and shouted, not yet, it's not over yet. But he wore a sly grin as the door shut. A monster appeared behind the door. Jin stood there stunned, while the man remained arrogant. I specially acquired this at someone's request. The huge, terrifying monster stomped forward heavily. If sweet talk doesn't work, then so be it. He beamed broadly. I'll make you. The monster before Jin opened its maw and unleashed violet power along with his words. Become pathetic and shatter. Then it thrust a massive arm out. Jin glanced up cautiously, crossing his arms over his head as it prepared to strike. The man froze and frowned. Huh. It turned out the monster's punch was gently stopped by his 2 arms. You see, I was born with an extraordinary body. As he caught the blow and glanced over. Compared to ordinary people, it seems I have more muscle fibers than him. Then Jin shoved it straight up. Well, he leapt with green power coiling around his hands. I won't go easy on a corrupted one like you. As he thrust his hand out, a flash of bright green power shot forth. And I'll use holy power too. Immediately the monster started leaking fluids all over the floor, terrifying the man to his core. Then Jin stood before him. He thought he can use holy power too. Then he said, so. His face deadpan, he asked, so what are you going to do next, huh? The man's face broke out in sweat, speechless, his hands clasped together, trembling. Can you please turn a blind eye and spare me this time? Before Jin could do anything, he landed a crooked punch on him. I can't. Jin shrugged into his coat. All right. He turned his back and walked off, leaving the punched man to sit and think. Found my clothes again. Then he looked at the iron cage with the 4 kids. Sorry, please hang on a bit longer. Jin's words made the 4 children feel like light returned. I'll get everyone out of here soon. He stood at the desk holding files. But first I need to investigate a few things. It's useless if I don't collect evidence of their crimes. He opened a drawer and found stacks of papers. Oh. He sat at the desk holding a sheet, thinking, this looks extremely suspicious. Weird lines of writing appeared on the paper. Jin smiled, I see. But immediately his head filled with question marks as he read them. What on earth are these lines about? I don't understand a single word. He stood there looking at the man collapsed on the floor. I'll have to ask Hakama to teach me how to read this era's language. Then he sat down and touched the fluids from the monster. Still, what are they planning to do after capturing these corrupted ones? Power streams appeared as he touched them. It's time to find out the truth. The electronic screens around them ran. I'll access the cameras from the nanos drifting around here. Jin sat there looking down, thinking. Any footage from the past week should still be stored in here. His gaze looked up, terrifying. Recalling before in the monster's pen, the man stood behind him. But sir, how do you plan to deal with such a large net? He replied. That's not something you need to worry about. He gave a creepy smile. However, I think I'll let you in on something. He glanced up, radiating menace. Soon, a very interesting event is about to take place in this country. At that moment, Jin stood before the screen, frowning. The next day, in an old-fashioned village, the people who'd been freed were lined up here. Hakama and Powaru were standing here watching too. Suddenly she gasped, seeing something. Nino ran over from Jin's side when she called, Nino, sis. The 2 cousins rushed into each other's arms, sobbing. They hugged tightly as Powaru's tears flowed. Thank goodness, thank the heavens. She took her sister's hand, looked up at him and said, Sir, thank you so much. He stood before them and replied, I'm no deity, but don't worry about it too much. Jin then glanced to the side. By the way, may I ask, looking toward the people marching in under guard, are the ones rounding up those bandits subordinates of the local lord? Hakama, standing beside him, answered, No, they're from the guild. I called them here myself. The 2 of them discussed Padoraku. The man standing over there is the guild master of this town. He asked, Is that so? He turned his face that way, then stepped up to them. Are you the one who dealt with this incident? Jin replied, Yes. Padoraku raised his hand and bowed with his men. My name is Padoraku, guildmaster of the association. I offer you our sincerest thanks for your assistance. Then he glanced upward. Jin standing there made him think. To face so many enemies without a scratch, he looks like a lowborn type. But my gut tells me. Thoughts formed in his head. This boy can't be ordinary. Then he spoke. We've recently received many reports of damages related to this string of incidents. The association has faced countless requests to eliminate this band of raiders. Jin replied, So the local lord isn't the one commanding the troops to capture them? Padoraku put his hand on his hip. You must be joking. A lord doesn't have that kind of authority. An image of him kneeling before his superiors appeared with the narration. The only ones authorized to handle crimes like this are association members who pledged loyalty to the king. He stretched out a hand and said, Even if this local lord, Sir Sappy, has broken the law, we still have a duty to report his actions to the king. Though that kind of thing never actually happens. Jin put a hand to his chin and thought. In terms 100 million years ago, a lord is like a mayor, and the association is like the police. His mind filled with uneasy thoughts about the man. But Shappian, he then produced a scroll and said, This is a document I recovered from those people. Will it be of use to you? Padoraku opened it and was astonished. This is a list of those who made secret deals with the bandits. He continued reading. With this in hand, we can round them all up in one fell swoop. He asked, Does the local lord's name appear on it? Jin frowned at the answer. Don't take my earlier joke seriously. Of course it's not there. In his head he thought slyly, I see I must be quite the skilled villain. He looked toward Powaru, who was full of questions, and thought, Right now there's nothing more I can do. More importantly, Jin placed his hand on Poweroo's little brother's head and turned to him. What will become of those freed slaves? What does their future hold? Padaraku replied. For those with requests filed or whose identities have been verified, the guild will take responsibility for returning them to their homes. The two children stood there with bowed heads, saddened by his answer. But for those who don't fall under either category, we truly can't do anything for them. He stood there thinking, if I remember right, these two kids lost both their parents. He then asked, isn't there any care facility around here? Padaraku looked to the side. None at all. We can only act as intermediaries to help them find work. But looking at those poor kids, he added, since these two belong to a low-born race, I'm afraid finding work for them will be extremely difficult. Jin bowed his head and sighed, thinking, I really want to help them, but the two children just looked at each other, and he watched them with the thought, if nowhere will hire them, it'll be hard to find work. Suddenly Jin realized something. Wait, no, hold on. Then he said to the two children, if there's a place both of you could work, would you be willing to go? Poweroo hurriedly answered, yes, sir. Do you already have a place in mind? Jin smiled, indeed. He recalled Argus saying, if you ever run into trouble later, come find me. Jin's face turned a bit creepy. There's a place that's absolutely perfect for both of you. The next day, at Argus's mansion in the capital of the kingdom of Kermosia, Argus's eyes were wide with alarm. Rhea, riding behind him, asked, what's wrong? He, on the lead horse, replied, nothing, just got a sudden chill down my spine. Then he dismounted from his horse. Argus stood beside the horse and turned to look. This is far enough. He stood before his troops. The long expedition has ended. Thank you all, rest well today. Then he stepped into the building. All the maids bowed in unison. Welcome home, Master Argus. He turned to ask the steward, any new reports? He looked toward the maid who stood there, worried. Argus closed his eyes and asked, has something happened? The steward beside him bowed. I'm truly sorry to trouble you when you're tired. But he then looked up and said, don't worry about it. He looked anxious and averted his gaze. A girl on the balcony watched the two of them walk together. It was Milia, arms crossed, watching. Argus waved a hand. I understand, thank you for the report. He bowed, it's nothing. Then he put a hand to his head and sighed in thought. The situation looks worse than I thought. He recalled the monster harmed city residents. An invader showed up right in the capital. How did it get in here? Argus frowned menacingly. No, someone must have intentionally released it here. He remembered the grounds at that place. The most suspicious thing was how they strictly forbade anyone unauthorized from entering Harnick's academy. Anyway, the moment of Jin walking off with the three children flashed before him. I need to quickly find allies. 3 days had passed since the campaign against the bandits. Jin was traveling with Poweroo, her younger brother, and Hakama on the road. She grimaced and turned to him. Are you really sure there's a suitable job for someone like me in the capital? He glanced over. Don't worry too much. Jin kept his gaze on her. You already know how to read and write. Poweroo even has a knack for numbers. You'll definitely find a position. He added, trust in your own abilities. Those words made her turn happily to him. Yes, sir. Suddenly a voice called, Jin, look. Hakama pointed toward a distant castle. We're there. Surprise filled Jin's face as he saw the four of them gazing down at the magnificent kingdom from above. Is this the capital of that realm? Here the sky seemed washed in pink. The four of them were amazed at the sight, especially Poweroo. This place looks bustling and lively. Hakama pointed at a stall across the way. The capital depends heavily on imports, so goods from all regions flow here. Items came to the girl's mind. Kodama villagers often make the trip to sell their specialties here. Jin looked at her. I've heard that before too. He glanced at the strange people nearby. I get it, an interesting place. An insect tribe, is it? He looked at 2 other kinds of people and said, so many races and civilizations converge here. It's no wonder unique developments arise. Then he turned toward a stall. These are goods imported directly from a neighboring country. The city was kept extremely clean. Jin looked at the children and noted that the security system also seemed reliable. Then he glanced at something else. Yet, on the other side, a well-dressed man stood before some homeless people. He frowned and thought, perhaps every era has its own problems. Milia had been standing behind him. He looked down at Hakama. When do you enroll? The girl looked up and answered, next week. She watched them walk as he said, so we still have some time to prepare. She replied, enrollment happens right after exams. She thought, I want to apply to Harnick's academy. She held a folding fan to her mouth and gave a sideways look at a kid like that, and at a man of a low-born race. That evening, a girl stood before a house brightly lit with lamps. Inside, Poweroo's younger brother and Hakama were happily jumping on the bed together. Jin sat on the bed too. At last we found a decent place to rest. The girl lying beside him answered, Yes, that's right. He stood there, hand to his mouth, thinking, now the group has finally arrived. The capital of the kingdom. What should my next move be? He held a pouch of gold and thought, either way, I still need money to survive in this age. Hakama stepped up and set the coin pouch on his head, prompting him to think. Although we got a reward for defeating the bandits, that money won't last forever. Father said we need to give a share to the former slaves as well. The image of Pawaru exhausted from caring for her sibling came to mind. On top of that, there's the issue of finding steady jobs for the two kids. He recalled Argus and thought, meeting that young man would be the fastest solution. But without an introduction, it's hard to see him immediately. Jin brought a hand to his chin and cast a sidelong glance. Then he rose from the bed. Perhaps first I should conduct a thorough investigation into the corruptors of this era. He recalled the thugs from before, especially knowing there were people plotting to exploit them for dark purposes. Jin stood at the window, thinking, the corruptors are a terrifying menace. We absolutely can't let them run rampant. He glanced down at the bustling scene below. I will never allow that dreadful era to repeat. He suddenly asked Hakama, what do people in this country do when they want to learn or research something? The girl propped her chin up on the bed. They go ask someone, find a teacher, or look through books. Then she flopped onto the bed. But books here are very expensive. In Kodama village, we had to share a few scarce volumes. They were hard to come by. Hakama looked up. But the capital has a large library. You can definitely go there to look up information. Jin put a hand to his mouth. There's a library here. Then he looked up, thinking, perfect. I'll make full use of it. Maybe I'll even find clues about the research facility Kagura left behind. A pink-haired girl sat happily and said, I'm very sorry, but you are not allowed to use the facilities here. The four of them were puzzled when she said, because books are considered state property, we can't let just anyone enter freely. She continued, access is limited to students officially recognized by the academy, faculty, and nobles residing in the capital. Jin sighed. I see. Hakama stood beside him nonchalantly, but you couldn't even read at first. Jin suddenly realized, all right, I still can't read well yet. He remembered Hakama and Pawaru teaching him in the forest. People had been teaching him lately, but he'd need more time to become fluent. He covered his face and grimaced, sighing, what should I do now? Behind them, two hooded people were whispering, is that them? The other reached out. Those low-born types with the kids, that's them. A voice then called, making him turn. Got a moment to spare. As he turned, a fist lunged at him, but Jin caught the punch effortlessly, his face growing more menacing. A moment, huh? Your greeting style is unique. The kid still flashed a bright smile. Funny, I thought security here was supposed to be good. From the grip of the two men, a golden light emitted. Then Jin released his hold, and the boy raised his hand as the golden light flared. They shot into the sky, surprising everyone, but he still smiled and extended his hand. You're dead wrong, your instincts are sharp too, buddy. Pawaru's brother hugged her tightly, and she feared. How dare they use divine power right in the city center? Jin stood and asked, can you tell me what your purpose is? The boy raised his hand and answered, someone saw you lot and found you offensive to the eye. Thoughts flickered across his eyes, so someone hired them to come here. He put a hand to his chin, thinking, good, this actually plays into my plans. The two lads laughed smugly. If you vanish from the capital right now, you won't have to worry about threats every day, got it? He replied. When things truly become dangerous, I'll consider it. The boy paid him no mind and threw another punch. Is that so? But Jin clamped down on the boy's wrist. The boy's face went slack and drained of color. Then he gently flattened him with a single move, sending him sprawling to the ground. He looked like his head might pop off from the impact. The other guy's hand was held fast by a golden force. You bastard. He spat fire from behind Jin, and Jin seemed to be caught in the flames. This delighted him, but before he could celebrate, Jin stepped out of the smoke and reached for him. With one hand, Jin grabbed the collar of his shirt. He gently lifted him up with one hand while the guy trembled. If you really want to threaten me properly, come back when you're stronger. He raised a fist as if to punch, adding, if you still have the guts to challenge me again. Lifted off the ground, the kid panicked. This guy, isn't he supposed to be lowborn? As they did this, a loud shout came from the other side. Enough! Everyone froze. Don't move. Karina appeared, frowning. Honestly, not even during a day off can it be peaceful. You dare brawl right in the street. They all stared at the girl, pointing her sword and yelling. I'll throw every one of you in jail, so brace yourselves. Her shout made Jin drop the kid and turn to look. Seems a little chaos finally paid off. Karina pointed in shock. Are you that lowborn guy from the other day? The girl's disdain was obvious from her face to her eyes. Then Karina raised her spear and pointed it straight at Jin. You've got some nerve. Just stepped into the capital and already causing trouble. Still full of arrogance, she declared. Lower beings will always be lower. There are limits you should know, what's allowed and what's not, Cappage. But someone else spoke up. She hesitated as she recounted the details. Sorry to interrupt, but I happened to pass by and saw the whole thing. Those people were actually the ones ambushed by the others, so I think their actions were purely self-defense. The explanation left Karina looking stunned. After a moment, a familiar voice rang out. Well, he does look very familiar. Karina glanced at the fellow, then turned to ask, You lot, are you cadets from Harnisk Academy? After some conversation, she sighed, seeming less bored. As I thought, I hope that young lady isn't involved in this mess. Jin, curious, asked, Which young lady? Karina ordered her subordinates as she replied, Take them away. This is our internal matter, you needn't worry about it. He was surprised by Karina's actions. So even holy knights do patrols? I thought that was the guild's job. She replied coldly, This capital is vast, we're just helping keep public order. But inwardly she thought, Honestly, I was just passing by looking for snacks. Suddenly her expression turned serious. She covertly sized Jin up. This guy really does have formidable strength. Those cadets earlier weren't pushovers either. Then she turned away, signaling her farewell. All right then, try not to cause more trouble in this city. Suddenly Jin called out loudly for her to come back. Wait, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like you to lead me to a place. Karina turned, puzzled, and asked, You want me to take you somewhere? Night had fallen, at Argus's mansion. Jin sat in a chair and earnestly said, Hire us. Argus was taken aback. Didn't you tell me before to come find you if I needed help? He voiced a question. It seems you brought more people this time than when we met before. Jin replied casually, there were some unexpected developments. He slowly recounted everything. They'd encountered the bandits Argus had warned about. Seeing them imprisoned, he stepped in to rescue them. Argus asked anxiously, What about the bandits? Jin explained what he'd done. I taught them a lesson, then I left the rest to the guild to handle. Argus could only nod. I see. But he secretly wondered, could one man really have beaten them all? Thinking that, he asked, Why did you decide to help those girls? Jin replied calmly, They have no family, they're what you call lower class. His gaze softened as he looked at the two youngsters beside him. I figured I should at least try to find them work. Argus raised doubts. I don't think it's your responsibility to take care of them. Jin responded calmly, It's just my working principle. He spoke earnestly. Whatever the reason, I saved their lives and I won't do things half-heartedly. I'll take responsibility for this to the end. Argus was surprised to hear that. Meanwhile, Porwaru and the boy were deeply grateful. After a moment's thought, Argus nodded in agreement. All right, they can stay and work here at the mansion. She asked again, delighted to be sure. Really? However, Argus added with his own intent, I have one condition. His voice rose slowly. I want you to take on the role of an instructor. Jin was utterly surprised. An instructor. A short while later, Porwaru and the boy had changed into their work clothes. Jin nodded approvingly at their appearance. Looking the part, aren't you? She bowed gratefully to Argus. Sir Argus, we are deeply grateful. Seeing that, he replied gently, No need to thank me. Then Argus turned to instruct the servants. I trust you too. In training them, there must be no discrimination simply because they're lower class. The two immediately complied. We obey. Before leaving, Porwaru waved to Jin. Thank you very much. On the way, Jin asked first, So, this instructor offer, you're hiding something, aren't you? Argus led the way and replied calmly. Sharp of you to notice. It'll help with the task. Seriousness showed in his eyes. Though I don't know your background, I want to trust that you're the right person for this. What Argus really wanted to ask was, I want you to carry out a covert investigation inside Harnisk Academy. Upon hearing that, Jin's expression grew grave. What's this all about exactly? Argus slowly revealed a shocking secret. This kingdom has become the target of many factions vying for power. Jin, puzzled, asked back, Surely there's still a king ruling here. Argus's face darkened. The king is gravely ill and doesn't have much time left. Because of that, the struggle for succession has quietly begun in the shadows. He added further, There are those with no rightful claim to the throne who are eyeing the kingdom for themselves. Argus clenched his fist in anger. They're using illegal invaders and dragging innocent people into their sinister plots. Putting the pieces together, Jin realized. I see. So it's not just that local lord we need to watch out for. Argus's voice rang clear. Dangerous people like that are hiding and operating right here in the capital. We must uncover their stronghold as soon as possible. Jin continued. And the most suspicious place is Harnisk Academy, right? Argus did not deny it. Exactly so. At that moment, Argus stood before a door and knocked. I'm coming in. He opened the door and introduced to Jin. This girl will be your guide into the academy. Inside the room, someone had been seated for some time. Let me introduce her to you. My sister studies at Harnisk, Milia Uten. Argus raised his hand in introduction. Suddenly Milia stood up and interrupted. Brother. She looked at them with haughty eyes. Do you mean to tell me you're entrusting that secret mission you mentioned to that lowborn? Argus hurriedly scolded. Milia, that was rude. But Milia shot back fiercely. What's rude about it? Isn't the presence of such low-born people itself an insult? She gently fanned herself. That peasant-looking woman is one thing, but this task cannot be given to a common low-born. Jin found the whole scene entertaining. Truly a prejudiced young lady, poor Argus stuck with her. Argus apologized earnestly. Please don't pay any mind to her words. Karina sidled up and whispered to him. Although the young lady is talented, she has a deep dislike for those of lower race. Hearing that, Jin remarked, I get it. She's not much different from her, really. Just then, Milia fluttered her fan and cut in. Do you understand, brother? She listed her objections. This isn't just an infiltration mission. He must also fully carry out the duties of an instructor. Finally, Milia concluded. I don't believe a lowborn has the ability to teach others, unless he actually holds the necessary credentials. At that, a voice rang out to expose the truth. Jin can't even read. That fact embarrassed Jin. Don't go announcing that. Read. Milia looked disappointed at his level. Then he's completely unqualified to even be considered. Suddenly a sincere voice spoke up. There are many things only Jin can teach. Jin is truly extraordinary, more than any of us. Milia fell silent and carefully assessed Jin again. After a moment, she arrogantly brushed past him. Well, it seems he has enough strength to suppress and discipline the students, huh? Before leaving, her cold gaze warned. But being a teacher requires more than brute strength alone. Then Milia closed the door and stepped out. Karina rubbed her head wearily and spoke first. About those cadets on the road, I guess that young lady was behind them. Argus looked utterly helpless. I deeply regret that. I'll make sure to discipline the brat properly. Jin sympathized and comforted. I don't mind. He quickly steered the topic back to business. Also, as an instructor, exactly what subject do you intend me to teach? Argus promptly answered. Spiritcraft. He calmly pointed out. Based on our assessment, you're extremely proficient in spiritcraft. Am I right? Jin was silent for a moment, then asked. Which part of spiritcraft should I teach? Argus replied at once. Just teach the basics. He listed. Fire ignition, lightning discharge, ice formation, healing. If you can perform even 2 of these 4 basic techniques, that's sufficient. Jin, poker-faced, exclaimed. That's it, that's simple. His remark left Argus puzzled as he asked, what do you mean by just that? Argus couldn't believe it and pressed on. Don't tell me you can use those rare spiritcraft techniques that only a few can perform. Jin suddenly pondered an unfamiliar term, and after thinking he realized. Wait, so that bandit is actually considered part of the elite class in this era. The corner of Jin's mouth twitched. How interesting. Finally, he made his decision. All right, I suppose I'll shake up this era's conventional views a bit then. In the blink of an eye, a new term was about to begin. A week passed at Harnisk Academy. The atmosphere on entrance exam day was bustling. The candidates arriving were visibly excited. Among them, Hakama also came to take the exam. She looked very focused for this try. Elsewhere, Rudman warmly welcomed Argus and Jin into the school. Oh my, it's an honor to be escorted here by you in person. He was courteous upon seeing Argus among the Holy Knights. I suppose Unit 7 must be very busy. Please don't worry too much about that. It's simply our turn to carry out the duty. Jin, standing behind and hearing those words, grew suspicious. Our turn, huh? Argus explained plainly and patiently to him. Once a year, the Holy Knights take turns choosing a member to serve as a special instructor for this academy. This year, that duty falls to Unit 7. I understand. Argus's words left Jin even more pensive. Am I really cut out for this job? Rudman caught the look of his contemplation with a glance. Rudman led the 2 of them to a door and invited. This way. He opened the door and announced. The headmistress and the board are waiting for you inside. Inside the room, the headmistress looked at them with a sly, calculating gaze. Argus entered and bowed respectfully. It's been a long time, headmistress. The headmistress smiled faintly and praised. Since you graduated top of your class, you've quickly become an outstanding knight in a short time. While the 2 chatted, Jin kept scanning the room. Thank you for agreeing to help us. It's a duty I must fulfill. The headmistress leaned back in her chair and said calmly, I've also heard some rumors. Her look was pointed. Not only dealing with spiritcraft issues, but you've also been pulled into disputes among internal factions. Her tone remained composed but carried a threat. I understand you can't deploy many people since everyone's very busy. The headmistress fixed her sharp eyes ahead. That doesn't give you the right to be disrespectful in this academy. She was really referring to Jin, of course. Don't tell me you're letting that fellow be an instructor here. The three of them showed Jin nothing but disapproval. Jin could only sigh in helplessness at their attitude. Argus bowed once more and stood up for Jin. Rest assured, he far surpasses everyone else in Unit 7 of mine, at least in terms of actual combat skills. Even he recognizes Jin's talent. The headmistress frowned, considered for a moment, then decided, "If you say so, I'll accept that for now." Just as the headmistress fretted over the matter, Jita beside her spoke up. "But how are we to handle this? Headmistress, I strongly oppose it." He pointed a finger at Jin and spat insults. "At this sacred, historic academy, there is no precedent for allowing the lower race to teach. This position is not for an inferior class. Are you trying to insult our academy?" Those words shook the headmistress slightly. She turned and asked, "Mr. Jita has spoken, Mr. Rudman. What's your view?" Rudman pretended to ponder, then offered, "I agree with him. Most of our students come from noble lineages. If a lowborn were allowed to teach, it would surely provoke fierce resistance from students and even the faculty." The headmistress, pleased, feigned a helpless sigh. "As you see, my thinking is basically the same as theirs. But let him speak for himself." Hearing that, Jin slowly stepped forward. He bowed respectfully to the headmistress and introduced himself. "Forgive my late introduction. I'm from the village of Kodama. My name is Jin Shidu." Jin's bearing prompted the headmistress to reassess him. Despite the severe insults, he remained oddly calm. Jin replied with a sharp, confident look. "I fully understand your concerns. However, I'd like to ask a small question. Am I unfit to be an instructor merely because I'm of a lower race? Or is it because I lack actual ability?" The headmistress struck a magnanimous tone and said gracefully, "Obviously the latter. As long as one has the ability, the rest doesn't matter." She then challenged Jin, "Can you prove your competence?" Argus seized the moment and suggested, "If that's the case, why don't we run a little test?" Everyone moved out to the training yard. At Harnisk Academy's Spiritcraft practice field, Jita faced Jin and began to explain. "Since today is the entrance exam, there are hardly any students around. At least that way, we avoid losing face in front of a crowd." Jin just stood silently observing, offering no reply. The headmistress stood between them and announced the rules. "The rules are simple. The two of you will duel using only Spiritcraft. You're here to apply for the Spiritcraft instructor post. So witnessing your power firsthand is the best evaluation, right?" The students watching the scene began to whisper curiously, "What's going on? I hear a friendly match is about to happen. This might be the first time I've ever seen Lord Jita fight." Milia couldn't help but glance over at the chatter. Hearing all that babble, Jin muttered inwardly, "What a waste of time." The headmistress and everyone outside focused their attention. "All right then, let's see what a lower race fellow can actually do." Even Argus felt a flutter of nerves watching Jin fight. This is the first time I've seen him in action. He knew well that lower races often had weak physiques. Even if they possessed divine power, it usually only manifested in small bursts. So Argus could only pray silently for Jin. "I just hope my decision wasn't a mistake. Are you ready?" Jita smiled with malicious delight. He wasted no time and hurled a fireball at Jin. "I'll strike first." But Jita's technique was easily dodged by Jin. The students outside watched in awe. Jita glanced at that group of students and felt even more smug. He continued to gather power, sending bolts of lightning straight forward. No matter how strong the attack, Jin easily leaped and dodged every strike. Jita sneered inwardly. "All you do is run, truly trash of the lower races." He remained confident. "I may not be a holy knight, but I graduated top of this academy. You don't stand a chance against me." Jita showed no mercy and unleashed another finisher. No matter how potent Jita's strikes were, Jin effortlessly avoided them all. Jin thought to himself, "Honestly, I shouldn't use this power against a mere human." But because of Jita's continual provocation, he was forced to act. "I'll show you a small part of it then." A gigantic orb of power appeared directly above Jita. The energy sphere crushed him into the ground. The headmistress and Rudman opened their eyes wide in astonishment at what had happened. Even Argus couldn't hide his surprise. Milia couldn't contain her astonishment when she saw Jin's technique. Jita was crushed to the ground, unable to get up. What is this? What just happened?" Jin stepped closer and taunted. "I merely adjusted the gravity around him a bit. Haven't you ever heard of that kind of spiritcraft?" He sneered. "Looks like I'll have plenty to teach at this academy." Jin tightened his gloves and proclaimed to everyone present, "Not only lessons for the students, but lessons for all of you as well." Jita was pinned beneath Jin's power and couldn't move an inch. He forced himself up and glared at Jin through gritted teeth. Jin calmly snapped his fingers. At his snap, the orb pressing on Jita vanished and released him. Jita, oblivious to his own situation, kept ranting. "Jin, what kind of trick was that? That's clearly spiritcraft, don't you know that? Trembling with anger, Jita jabbed a finger at Jin and shouted, I've never heard of such a strange spiritcraft. You must be using some cheap deception. The headmistress and Rudman could only look on, helpless. This incident truly won their grudging respect for Jin's power. It seemed everything was over. The students outside who witnessed the match couldn't stop whispering. Milia had already guessed the technique Jin used. No doubt about it, it was a very high-level spiritcraft. She still couldn't believe it. How could that be? Unlike us, the ones evolved under the protection of spirits, that lower race shouldn't be able to possess any divine power at all. Milia glanced at Jin with curious, doubtful eyes. So what is he, after all? Who is that man? A week later, a solemn voice rang out across the campus. The headmistress stood on the podium and told all the students, This academy does more than teach books. Its core goal is to train true warriors, those capable of destroying the hollow. Anyone who can't keep up with the curriculum will be expelled from the academy without mercy. She also issued an enticing invitation. However, for those who complete the program, joining the ranks of the Holy Knights will no longer be a distant dream. All outcomes depend on your own abilities. Milia's group stood high above and murmured, We've taken in quite a few new students this year, haven't we? Indeed, it seems commoners make up a good portion. While Milia was lost in thought, an orange-haired student came up to talk to her. Milia, it's rare to see you at the entrance ceremony. I thought you were the sort who never cares about others. The two stood chatting. The orange-haired boy asked, What about you? If a prestigious noble shows up among the new students, you'd try to win them over to save face, right? Suddenly, the orange-haired boy glanced down in alarm. What's happening down there? His attention landed on Jin sitting in the teacher's row. Why is a member of a lower race sitting in the faculty seats? Because he's a professor. Milia read the orange-haired boy's thoughts from his expression and asked, From your perspective, what do you make of that man? The orange-haired youth stammered in embarrassment. Even so, he's just someone from a low-ranked race. Milia maintained her haughty air and judged, Maybe you're not wrong. Jin sat below, observing everything around him. He glanced at the students with a displeased look. This school is really huge. The investigation will certainly take a lot of time. Those stares really get on my nerves, Jin thought. First things first, I need to wipe away this lower race label. Even the lecturers next to him were wary of sitting beside him. If this keeps up, I'll attract way more attention than necessary. Forget the investigation. I'm already the most suspicious person in the academy. First, I must earn their recognition. Everything else continued peacefully at the academy. Jita stood on the lectern and began introducing today's lesson. Now we'll begin today's class on spiritcraft. Make sure you don't get overtaken by the new recruits. Always stay vigilant. He smiled with glee. Yes, that's exactly what I want to convey. Seeing only a handful of students present, Jita angrily scolded. What's going on? Why are attendance numbers so low today? Huh, are you all lacking enthusiasm? Milia sat above and sighed helplessly. She understood the reason. Jita smugly thought, who would bother attending a class taught by that lower scum? He was the reason for today's absenteeism. I deliberately spread word that a lowborn would be teaching today. Feigning a friendly smile, Jita invited Jin up. How troublesome. Fine, let's begin. Lord Jin, please introduce yourself. Jin did not hesitate to stand before everyone and introduce himself. I'll start the introductions. My name is Jin Shidu. I've been assigned here to teach you the fundamentals of spiritcraft for the coming period. Nice to meet you all. The red-haired student crossed his arms and challenged. Do you really think you're qualified to do this? Nodding his attitude, Jin replied nonchalantly. I'll let you all judge that for yourselves. Not only did he stay calm, he even offered, If you find my lessons worthless, you are free to skip my classes. But there is one mandatory rule you must remember. Jin clenched his fist and warned everyone in a solemn tone. Never, under any circumstances, use this power to harm people. He began his lecture. The essence of spiritcraft is the ability to nullify the super-regenerative powers of the corrupted. However, this suppressive effect does not work on human bodies. You will only cause ordinary physical injuries to them. Do you know why? Jin clenched his fist again and declared, Because this power was created solely for the purpose of destroying the corrupted. Therefore, I demand that you must not abuse this authority. A boy in class laughed and mocked. Are you an idiot? Power is just power. The gray-haired student deliberately provoked, sneering. I was curious what a lowborn could teach, and now you tell us not to use spiritcraft. His words set the class laughing and whispering, teasing him. Jin wasn't particularly surprised by their attitudes. He merely sighed in resignation and said, If you think I lack strength, then prove it. This time Jin taunted, Use the strongest move you've got and attack me. He even made a wager. If you can scratch me even a little, I promise I'll vanish from this place and never return. The gray-haired student laughed loudly, triumphant. Don't come crying and begging when you regret it. Lowborn, don't wait until it's too late to back down. Jita next to him clutched his head and scolded. Hey, you idiot, stop! Are you trying to hit me too? The gray-haired boy unleashed his power, sending out a massive surge of energy straight at Jin, creating a powerful shockwave. He smugly waited for the result. Suddenly, a small dagger from within the smoke whizzed straight forward, impaling the wall behind him and shattering a large section of it. Jin slowly emerged from the smoke and calmly said, "If I'd wanted to, you would have died right after that attack." He looked at the gray-haired student and offered a lesson. Judging others by appearances alone is a deadly mistake. The orange-haired student, still stunned by what he'd seen, wondered, what was that just now? Was that spirit craft? All the students now showed caution at Jin's power. He spoke in a clear, authoritative tone. You believed I was weak because I'm from a lower race, right? But the truth is I'm far stronger than you. Jin stared at him. So what do you think you should call me to be polite? Let me give you an answer. The previous attack served as a lesson to establish Jin's authority. He declared, from now on, you will call me Professor. Jin gave a small, pointed smile and emphasized, does anyone here truly understand the conditions needed to activate spiritcraft? He looked at everyone below, then fixed his gaze on the student who'd attacked him. You who just struck at me, answer my question. The student stood up, embarrassed and anxious. Isn't it simply based on one's imagination? He immediately summoned a spell while thinking aloud. Mages focus and raise their mana, then transmit the images in their minds to the spirits to materialize them. Isn't that the most basic knowledge? Hearing that, Jin's lips curled slightly. Imagination does play an important role, but it's not a prerequisite for activation. No sooner had he spoken than he summoned an energy in his palm. Spirits truly unleash their power only after they receive a specific frequency wavelength. The student's face went blank. A frequency wavelength? Jin continued to explain. Basically, there are 8 primary wavelengths. He carefully demonstrated and explained in turn. A flame erupted in his right hand. Incineration. The other hand summoned a bolt of electricity. Electrocution. Next came a warm energy, healing, and finally a freezing gust, freezing. These are powers you should have already mastered. The students' faces froze. Jin went on. Besides the types I mentioned, there's also the ability to manipulate gravity. On his other hand, a radiant magic appeared. Light manipulation, air pressure control, and the ability I used earlier, spatial protection. Witnessing this, Jita thought in astonishment. Can you really master all 8 types of spiritcraft? Jin looked at the spiritcraft displayed in his hands with satisfaction. Just like the way you unleashed that electric spear at me earlier. Visualization is an indispensable factor. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a small smile, folding his arms with a casual air. Shall we start the official lecture now? Time passed until the class ended. Jin strode alone down the corridor, thinking to himself as he walked. All right, it's come to this. I need to carry out an investigation inside this huge academy. Just then he heard some students whispering outside. That professor! Jin watched their attitudes. Everywhere he went, students swarmed about. I still haven't found a genuinely suspicious spot. Maybe I should search the off-limits areas where students aren't supposed to go. He noticed Milia standing nearby. His brow tightened as he glanced at her. His sixth sense seemed to warn Milia as well, and she turned to look at him. Jin ignored her and walked on calmly, but Milia hurriedly called out, Hey, you over there, where exactly are you from? He turned back and replied with a sarcastic tone. So you're not just some low-class specimen, are you? Milia snapped angrily. You're certainly not ordinary, I have to admit that. Saying that, Milia's expression fell into a sullen gloom. A lowborn shouldn't be able to use all kinds of spiritcraft. Jin looked puzzled. I just explained this in class. Anyone can do it if they can distinguish the wavelengths. Milia sighed. Don't make it sound so easy. She glanced as other students whispered. All kinds of spiritcraft in one hand? Really? Milia asserted confidently. If it were that easy, you wouldn't be drawing this much attention. Then she turned. Let's find somewhere else to talk. Before long, the two reached a deserted spot with no one around. Milia suddenly turned and asked, So, are you willing to answer my question now? Jin remained calm. Simple. For the past 100 million years, I was an ancient man sleeping soundly in the Kodama village. Milia walked on and remarked, You're really good at jokes. She stopped and spoke seriously. Then let me ask again, what were you doing 100 million years ago? Jin was slightly puzzled by the strange question. A lot happened. Back then, I was a covert agent. Milia frowned in confusion. A covert agent? He smiled and explained. Someone who served the nation. I fought countless villains. Jin recalled those times, vague images surfacing in his mind. even though it took place 100 million years ago. He remembered it as clearly as if it were yesterday. Now reminiscing, Jin smiled nostalgically. How sentimental. Milia still asked suspiciously. I wonder why someone like you ended up sleeping for 100 million years. He answered plainly and honestly. Because I failed. Jin slowly recounted. I thought I could handle everything on my own, if only I had tried harder. He emphasized. And the price was that I lost everything in utter helplessness. I also took this teaching position hoping you all would help me when trouble came. Milia wondered what percentage of his words were true. After finishing, Jin blinked and asked, By the way, which way are we going? Milia walked ahead nonchalantly. Anyway, I think I should fulfill my duty as a guide. After a while, Milia led him to a dilapidated room full of dust and cobwebs. Here we are. Jin stepped in a bit puzzled. Where is this place? Milia answered bluntly. This is the room where instructors store materials for class. Jin stroked his chin, puzzled. So this is just a storage closet. He began to look around. Suddenly he spotted a little owl statue on a shelf. When his eyes landed on the statue, Jin's brow furrowed as if he'd sensed something odd. He immediately turned to Milia and asked, Why did you bring me here? She pulled out a stack of papers. That means I'm investigating too. There's a very unusual void right next to this room. It's large enough to form another chamber. Milia asked, Suspicious, right? If anything's hidden, it's definitely here. Jin was silent for a moment, then replied, I understand. The moment he touched the owl statue, a hidden passageway revealed itself. Seeing the dark passage, Jin said, Seems your suspicion was spot on. Milia wondered about the passage. How did you spot it? He answered nonchalantly. Although this area is covered in thick dust, only this spot is strangely clean. The rest was a hunch built from my experience. Then he decisively went inside. I'll check it out. You should wait out here. Milia panicked. Wait, I want to go with you. Jin paused and warned plainly. If there's something in there, it could be a corruptor. This will be dangerous. Do you understand? Milia frowned in affirmation, beating her chest confidently. Don't underestimate me. After all, my grades are top of the year. I have skills that rival my brother's. Hearing that, Jin gave a small smile and nodded. Fine, I'll trust your ability. So Jin led the way, with Milia trailing carefully behind. As they walked, Jin felt, this path goes deep underground. Milia thought inwardly, light control tech really is handy. After a while, Jin suddenly said, If this were a fantasy story, I'd swear a monster is about to appear. Milia paused slightly, then asked, By the way, back to earlier, having fought villains so long, have you got any leads on the suspect? Jin forced a smile. You're asking too many questions for one workday. Later he sighed, pondering, I guess. There's a chance Lord Rudman is involved. Milia froze. How do you know? Jin reasoned. He seems very calm during conversation, but when he's not speaking, his mind seems elsewhere. That's a trait often seen in those forced to act against their original purpose. He recalled and continued. His vigilance is unusually strong, but I pretended not to notice. Milia frowned, thinking back. Before this, I thought Professor Jita was the suspicious one. Jin smiled and replied, That's impossible for a lecturer like him. All his emotions show clearly on his face, so he must be kind-hearted without guile. Then he looked down the path. All right, let's keep going. Suddenly they came upon a scene of swirling dust and white mist. Milia looked up and observed. Hard to believe there's such a vast space under the academy basement. Walking along as usual, Jin suddenly halted. Milia, a bit frightened, asked, What's wrong? He exclaimed in surprise. I didn't expect it to be in a place like this. Jin stared at the sturdy gate before him, thinking to himself. The gate leading to the laboratory Kagura left is everywhere. Jin looked up at the towering door before him, silently marveling. This is the laboratory Kagura left behind. He watched the pale blue light that covered the door, thoughts racing. This door is protected by nanoparticles. That has to be it. At the same time, Milia froze, staring at the huge door with obvious doubt. A gate this massive beneath the academy. She stepped closer to Jin and lowered her voice. Do you think we can get inside? He touched the door lightly and replied calmly. Basically, you need an access key. Milia blinked. An access key. Jin kept scanning the area, his tone composed. Think of it as a conduit to unlock this door. Saying that, he quietly propped his hand on his chin and pondered. Memories suddenly flooded his mind. The light from the small key on Hakuma's neck flashed in his recollection. He analyzed carefully. In that Kodama village, Hakuma inherited the key. It's very likely someone here inherited a similar one. Jin frowned slightly. Before he could finish, a faint light immediately spilled from his hand. Jin placed his hand on the steel door. Immediately, the system's voice echoed in the silent space, confirming highest-level access authority. The giant door slowly swung open. A blast of biting cold rushed out. Jin stood calmly until the door was fully open, then sighed softly. The one intending to sow chaos in this nation is the one holding the access key. He led Milia inside. Before them was a gigantic monster imprisoned in an iron cage. The moment Milia saw it, she took a few steps back in terror, voice trembling. This terrifying thing is right under the academy. She turned to Jin, eyes full of doubt. But how did you open the door? Didn't you say an access key was required? Jin walked on calmly and replied, Ancients are peculiar. Milia watched him, countless questions swelling in her mind. Could he really be a person from 100 million years ago? Jin seemed indifferent to Milia's thoughts. He strolled slowly, observing each monster locked in iron cages. Suddenly Jin stopped and sighed softly. How strange. He knit his brow, suspicious. Why are they being held so obediently? Jin glanced at the other monsters, thinking quietly. Even the other corruptors showed no sign of wanting to attack. He suddenly recalled the monster he'd encountered before. The corruptor the bandits had kept in a cage had also been completely silent. Jin pondered. Most importantly, he stared silently at the giant corruptor before him, questions crowding his mind. How did they even get such a huge corruptor down here? At the same time, Milia fanned herself lightly and suddenly spoke. It seems my brother's suspicions about the academy hiding something were completely correct. She frowned and lowered her voice to consider. If we set up an ambush here, the mastermind behind it will surely show themselves. Just then Jin suddenly cut in. No. He looked at Milia and explained calmly. Before doing that, we need to seal off the academy and eliminate all of these corruptors. Hearing that, Milia immediately panicked and shouted, Are you telling me to just let that criminal escape? Jin quickly replied, a hint of reproach in his voice. I understand how you feel, but what if these corruptor monsters suddenly go out of control? His tone dropped, each word aimed to frighten Milia directly. The ones in danger would be the students in the school, the very people directly above us right now. Jin gently evoked the image of students laughing and chatting in the courtyard, calmly reminding her. Your brother would surely prioritize everyone's safety over capturing the villain. Hearing that, Milia gradually calmed and murmured, You have a point. Jin nodded slightly and added, Besides, I have a bad feeling. His voice grew serious. My instincts at times like this are usually spot on. I want to examine this lab more closely. Jin looked at Milia, his tone softening as if asking a favor. Contact Argus and close the academy for me. Can I trust you with this? Milia immediately nodded in agreement. As soon as he got the answer, he turned on his heel and left, sighing softly to himself. All right. Jin silently glanced up at the ornate clock hanging on the wall, then decisively stepped deeper into the laboratory, walking and thinking in silence. In this situation, he hoped to find some clue. At that moment, the ticking of time from the clock sounded, cold and echoing through the space. Back at the school, Jita strode along amid the whispering and murmurs of those around him. He clenched his fists, glaring angrily at the students pointing at him. Jita gritted his teeth, rage welling up. It's because of those lowly creatures that my honor has been utterly ruined. He fumed. Can that fellow really control 8 types of spirit craft? He's surely pulling some deceptive trick. Jita stamped his foot in annoyance, mentally shouting, I swear I'll tear his mask off myself. Just then, a steady voice sounded from behind him. Mr. Jita. The stern principal looked at him and said gravely, The students are starting to get frightened, so could you please stop those strange actions? Jita flinched. Principal. The principal sighed, her tone laced with sarcasm. Oh my, I'm not here to judge your personal tastes. He was startled to hear that. She treats it like a pastime. Suddenly she raised her voice. By the way, have you seen Mr. Rudman? Jita hesitated and asked. You mean Mr. Rudman? He rubbed his chin in thought and answered. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen him since the entrance ceremony earlier today. Before he finished, the principal sighed in exasperation. What a mess. She held her head, voice full of regret. I wanted to consult him about classes for the new students. Suddenly the principal froze, her sharp gaze looking up. What is that? She stared at the dark, brooding cloud in the sky, hesitating. What could that thing be? Elsewhere, Milia was rushing up from the deep underground chamber. She barreled through the heavy hatch and stepped out into the corridor above. Stopping, Milia clutched her chest and panted, trying to catch her breath. She told herself she had to quickly report this to her brother. But at that moment, a cold voice cut through. What do you intend to report? The instant she heard it, Milia went pale and trembled, unable to speak. Rudman stood in the center of the room as if he'd been waiting for Milia a long time, his voice lowered and threatening. Miss Milia Uton. She saw the sly smile on his face and screamed in terror. Meanwhile, another heavy steel door opened on Jin's side, and a blazing red light spilled out from beyond. Jin muttered to himself, What the hell is this? He stood stunned, staring into the room as the red light washed over his face. Before Jin hovered a glowing red orb of energy, pulsing relentlessly like the heart of a living creature. Jin studied the control panel, suspicious. Could Kagura really have made these things? He glanced around, and his eyes immediately landed on a mysterious box sitting neatly on the table. Jin opened the box. Inside was a block and a strange liquid. He thought to himself, a nanoparticle comm system and blood injector left by Kagura. Jin activated the cubic device, full of expectation, hoping he'd left some clue to explain everything that was happening. The moment the device powered up, a fragmented voice sounded and Kagura's image and familiar voice appeared. "Can you hear me, Jin? It seems you've finally come here." Kagura spoke calmly. "I guessed you'd manage. This place is the closest to the lab where you woke up." He suddenly leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Yes, right in this lab we once built an astonishing device." Jin looked back at the strange liquid as Kagura's voice echoed. Part of that device's function was sealed inside nanoparticles. He pushed up his glasses and boasted loudly, "Truly, I am a genius. So what do you think this device is?" Kagura exclaimed excitedly. "It's a tool for instantaneous teleportation." Jin froze and stammered, "Instantaneous teleportation." At that moment, the image of the giant monster flashed through his mind. Jin stared at the weird, blazing thing pulsing in the center of the room, panic obvious on his face. Unbelievable. The giant monster stood motionless in its iron cage, surrounded by many smaller beasts caged as well. The clock hands kept moving, ticking away. The large clock displayed time spinning on and on. The grotesque red time machine across the way inspired horror and dread. Jin frowned in worry, thinking, a machine to teleport space. He pictured its power with a simple Apple example. It can link two separate spatial points. This is tech that even 100 million years ago couldn't be done. If that's true, the odd events tie into what Argus mentioned about corruptors suddenly appearing in the capital. Jin connected them to the machine before him. Were they brought there by this teleport device? He rubbed his chin in thought. Even the corruptor monsters in the main hall. Kagura on the screen kept explaining, pointing to the machine he'd made. And this is that spatial teleportation device. Jin looked on in astonishment. It seemed so different. He lifted his head, comparing the pale blue machine in the footage with the horrific red one before him. So what exactly is this? Time continued to rush by. The red machine suddenly flared with intense light. Its power radiated outward, making Jin wary. The massive beast in the cage was also bathed in the light. It suddenly woke, power surging. Immediately, a beam of light teleported the beast elsewhere. Over near the capital, Milia came running in a panic. "Lord Argus, there's an emergency in the capital." Argus looked up anxiously and replied, "I'm already aware of the situation." He frowned. If that's the case, this really is the worst-case scenario. Monsters were falling from the sky in terrifying numbers. Elsewhere, Rudman pretended not to understand and asked, "What's going on? Why is your face so serious?" But his eyes were utterly dark. Milia took a step back, ready to fight. "Get out of my way. You're implicated in this, aren't you?" Rudman's voice stayed calm. "Oh, so you figured it out early? Looks like you've been snooping around quietly." He sneered, "But you're one step late." Milia frowned. "What do you mean?" Rudman dropped the act. "Today is when the plan is executed, that's what I'm saying." He sighed reproachfully. "Actually, the original schedule was a bit later, but someone kept poking around, so I sped things up." Rudman's eyes lit up at that name. He mentioned Jin. "That man will definitely become a major problem for my plan. I can feel it by instinct. That guy is just as annoying as your brother." Rudman pointed to the passage behind Milia. "In fact, right now he's already found that secret passage. He's directly below us at this very moment. You know that? I want to root out those troublesome sprouts immediately." Milia smiled faintly and activated her magic. "Do you really think you can defeat me?" Rudman frowned with contempt. "Of course I can, because I possess an unstoppable power." He proclaimed this loudly, not knowing that behind Rudman, Hakama had sneaked up with a large jar ready to strike. Milia saw the scene too, but stayed silent, holding her breath and waiting. While Rudman kept babbling, "I'll show you its power." As the magic surged, a loud crashing sound rang out. Milia smirked faintly. Hakama exhaled in relief. The girl smiled. "I won." Milia asked in puzzlement, "Why are you here?" Hakama replied, "I'm looking for Lord Jin." The girl calmed herself. "Things outside are getting extremely chaotic. We really need Lord Jin's help." Hakama turned to look back. Kyudo said she'd seen Lord Jin go inside here. Milia hesitated and observed. "She's a first year." Kyudo awkwardly bowed. "Yes, my name is Kyudo Plaza." The girl anxiously hid behind Hakama. "Hey Hakama, is this really okay? You just hit a teacher." Hakama's voice was calm. "It'll be fine." The girl pointed and explained. "He hasn't seen our faces yet. We can pin all the blame on this young lady." Milia ground her teeth in anger, thinking, "That brat don't call me young lady." Footsteps outside grew louder and clearer. Hakama turned her head around. Jin arrived just in time. Hakama shouted, "Lord Jin!" He looked around, puzzled. What just happened? Hakama grabbed his sleeve. "Lord Jin, things outside are getting really bad." Jin bowed his head and replied seriously, "I know." The corrupted creatures that had been locked in the lab. Now every one of them was gone. Milia also realized this in horror. Everyone rushed outside at once. Below the city walls, the scene was utter chaos. Fires were spreading. People were being attacked by monsters and fleeing in panic. Some of the monsters could fly, making assaults on humans easy. Each of their steps made the ground tremble. At the head of them stood a huge, hulking beast, its face ringed with long tentacles like an octopus. A roar from the beast echoed through the air. Milia covered her mouth in alarm. Is the capital in danger? Jin gritted his teeth. I made a mistake in my judgment. I should have destroyed that machine from the start. Hakama urgently pointed. Jin, look up over there. The giant beast kept roaring violently. A massive orb of magic was forming in its mouth. Aiming straight for the capital, Kyudo guessed fearfully. That giant seems to be heading straight for the royal castle. Milia worried. If this keeps up, the royal family will be in grave danger. Jin took out a syringe. This is my fault. I'll step up and finish this. He injected himself. A surge of power flowed through his veins. The upgrade granted a function that simplified the spatial teleportation process. Jin recalled Kagura's words. Thanks to energy stored in the nanoparticles, usage is limited to once per day. The range was limited, usable only over short distances visible to the naked eye. The creature fired a beam of magical light straight at the castle. Jin teleported elsewhere at the same moment. He didn't hesitate to move directly in front of the attack, using a magical shield to block the strike. He could still appear instantly at any position. A giant snake roared fiercely through the city, sending citizens into desperate, panicked flight. Meanwhile, a soldier ran at full speed down a long corridor, trying to raise the alarm. A young woman rushed in, shouting for the guild master and warning that a giant corruptor was outside the walls. The guild master calmly replied that he was already aware of the situation outside. Then, with regret, he said, "Unfortunately, there's nothing more we can do." He explained, everyone capable of fighting has gone out to help evacuate civilians. The holy knights still able to move were rushing into fierce battle. The woman asked in surprise what he meant. The guild master began revealing the knights' situation. Half of them are on missions outside the capital. The woman was stunned. At that moment, a dark creature with multiple yellow eyes appeared, destroying everything in its path. The guild master realized this had been a calculated plan. The attackers struck precisely when the knights were absent. He lamented, if the commander were here, we'd have a chance. But the colossal beam of energy was still hurtling straight toward the kingdom's castle. Suddenly, a soldier pointed out the window, voice desperate. You have to see this. The guild master looked out, the old commander's expression flipping to utter astonishment. The protagonist formed a gigantic energy shield, stopping the creature's destructive attack. From the window, the guild master and his subordinates witnessed an unbelievable sight. The young woman recognized him and smiled with delight. That man, he's from Kodama village. The giant monster stood off at a distance, watching the city and preparing to continue its rampage. The hero quickly leaped from the rooftop down to the ground. He landed surrounded by a halo of blue energy. In that moment, the young man focused a terrifying amount of power into his palm. A massive beam of blue energy shot straight at the giant. The white-haired warrior faced the enemy with a serious, rock-steady gaze. The attack struck the creature's shoulder dead-on, and it felt the damage sharply. The protagonist realized its mass was too great to fell with a single blow. Besides, the teleport had eaten up more energy than he expected, so he decided to draw his energy sword and settle it with raw power. Weapon in hand, he readied himself and grinned. Might as well warm up a bit. Then the swordsman lunged full force, slashing a terrifying energy blade. The strike hit home. The giant howled in pain and fury. The hero immediately sprang high into the air to press the attack. He knew the monster would regenerate, but that hit bought him some time. With laser focus, the young man tapped into a special skill. He decided to apply basic nanomachine principles to the fight. He negated his body weight by manipulating gravity. His footsteps touched the ground as lightly as if he had no weight at all. Then he generated gusts by controlling air pressure, moving at astonishing speed. Meanwhile, a soldier collapsed, about to be attacked by another monster. But a gigantic fireball flew in, exploding against the creature's body and saving him. Someone shouted, "We're here to help." The soldier recognized these young people as cadets from Harisk Academy. One of them thanked the soldiers for their bravery. Two wolf-eared students readied themselves to fight as the capital was under threat. They were surrounded by two monsters and knew they had to give it everything. Suddenly, the protagonist stomped the ground hard, creating a shockwave. In an instant, He sliced the two monsters, threatening the students cleanly in half. The youths gaped at the sudden arrival and the power of the white-haired man. One asked, "Is that one a lower species?" The other confirmed it. The hero charged the giant, knowing its regeneration would take some time. However, the monster's arm had already fully regenerated, and it roared fiercely. It fired two beams of energy from its shoulders at the warrior. With supreme agility, the hero dodged by leaping at the last moment. He realized that, aside from the previous strike, this monster wasn't a major threat. The young man moved down the street, cutting down every monster in his path. He decided to finish the giant before it could strike again. The swordsman moved faster and faster, saving civilians while slaying monsters. With a determined smile, he focused his power to speed up even more. Then he charged straight at the primary target to finish it off. He sprang high into the air and brought down a terrifying vertical slash, cracking the ground open. The devastating stroke landed squarely on the giant's body. The many-eyed monster was stunned, not understanding what had just happened. In the distance, the knights watched this and were left speechless at his power. The girls on the rooftop also followed the scene, silent with amazement. Then the white-haired young man lunged in with terrifying speed, continuously unleashing a flurry of extremely fast sword strikes across the giant's body. The green-blue energy slashes hit true, causing enormous damage. From above, the hero watched the results, the slashes encircling the monster. He landed, facing the enemy as it prepared to counterattack. Gripping his glowing blade, he readied the final strike and declared, "This ends now." With all his strength, he delivered a final, obliterating slash. The monster was sliced apart by a barrage of green-blue energy beams. A massive green-blue energy explosion detonated in the middle of the city, lighting everything up. The blast was so monstrous it could be seen from afar, even beyond the kingdom's great wall. Inside the castle, the guild master and the girl heard the explosion and looked up in astonishment. "What's happening?" the guild master asked, worry clear on his face. The protagonist landed in style, while the giant dissolved into greenish smoke. "So who is that man after all?" the guild master wondered. 3 days passed, and the city began to be rebuilt after the giant monster's attack. On the street, the white-haired young man was standing, looking out from a building window. Inside the room, he stretched and thought to himself. Despite the chaos, the damage wasn't too severe. He sat on the bed, telling himself, "It's all thanks to the Holy Knight's skills." Many knights couldn't fight because they were occupied dealing with the giant corruptors. Because of that, the cleanup went quickly, and the knights actively aided the civilians. The academy was sealed off for investigation, and Professor Rudman, suspected as the mastermind, was finally arrested. Other professors and principals suspected of involvement were also taken away. He lay back on the bed, relaxed, thinking, "The academy's closed, and I was only gone for 1 day." But he realized this incident had presented him with a new challenge. He could handle groups of monsters, but couldn't kill them all at once to protect everyone. Conclusion: he needed to become even stronger. To do that, he picked up the blue cube his friend had left in the lab. But at that moment, a noise came from the door. He called out, "Who's there?" The protagonist went to open the door, and the white-haired young man found himself facing a blonde woman in an elegant ball gown. She smiled. "I'm here to take you somewhere." She called him master, which caught him a bit off guard. He felt odd and asked why she had come. The girl replied, "My brother sent me." She explained her brother wanted to thank him and discuss an important matter. Jin asked, "You came all the way here just to summon me?" She confirmed it. She said, "It'd be rude to send a servant to summon someone as important as you." Representing the Olton family, she came in person, which made him a little embarrassed. He asked, "So you no longer call me a lower species?" The girl struck a dramatic pose. "I've reconsidered. One shouldn't judge by appearances, one must respect everyone. Therefore, I hope to receive your guidance." Just then, the little girl with the ears appeared at the door. Jin called her name. The little girl said, "I was bored, so I came to visit you." The blonde looked annoyed and disdainfully called the girl Potato Kid. She complained about the girl's forwardness. Jin reminded her, "You just said you'd reconsider." They arrived at the vast, luxurious Argus family mansion. A servant from the mansion came out to greet and welcome the young lady. The butler called the 2 children over to lead the way. They obliged cheerfully. The white-haired young man remarked, "They look like they're used to this." The boy led him around. He asked if they had been injured in the chaos. The boy answered no. The girl explained everyone in the mansion had protected them because they were very strong and capable. He was glad to hear they were well treated. The maid praised his bravery in battle. He wondered where she had heard the news. The blonde replied, "From Lord Argus." She said spreading word of his deeds was her duty as a disciple, which made him even more embarrassed. She turned to the 2 children. "You should follow Master's example." The boy leaned in and whispered, "Miss Milia was strict before, but lately she's become gentler." Jin thought to himself, That's quite a change. The group continued up the grand staircase toward a door. The blue-haired maid knocked and announced, Master Jin has arrived. Upon entering the room, the white-haired young man faced two men waiting for him. One was a wolf-eared guildmaster, his gaze stern and intimidating. The blonde's brother invited him to sit. The two children watched curiously. Everyone sat. The knight apologized for summoning him abruptly, but Jin said it was fine. The armored man introduced the person beside him. This is the guild master of the royal capital, Lord Harden Gunslot. The man rose to shake his hand. Pleasure to meet you. Sitting down, the guild master said he had witnessed the young man's performance during the incident. Honestly, if you hadn't stopped that monster, our country would have been plunged into crisis. He bowed his head in thanks on behalf of the entire populace for saving the nation. But Jin modestly replied, I only took down the big monster. The holy knights handled the rest. They're the ones who deserve thanks. The guild master praised his humility, thinking to himself that the young man showed no hint of greed. Jin asked, is that all? The answer was no. Harden revealed, because of this incident, the royal family wants to meet him. Jin was astonished. The guild master said seriously that first they needed to clarify one thing. With a sharp gaze, he asked bluntly, who exactly are you? He explained that with the guild's reach, nothing could be hidden from him. Harden apologized for the intrusion, but he couldn't find any information on the young man. Argus also wanted to make it clear. This time there would be no excuses. The girls watched with worried looks. He asked, where did the mysterious man come from? What is his purpose in coming to our country? The white-haired young man calmly faced the two men as they waited for his answer. The room suddenly grew tense. Every eye turned to the silent warrior. Argus looked at him with a serious, steadfast gaze, waiting for the truth. The young man scratched his head and grinned sheepishly. I didn't mean to hide it. I just thought no one would believe me, so I stayed quiet. The knight smiled. If you say so, I'll believe you. The white-haired warrior smiled back. Then you will believe what I say. With a serious expression, he revealed, I am a human from 100 million years ago. Argus realized at once. You're the one called the Forbidden in Kodama village, understanding that he was the person who slept behind the unopenable door. The guild master admitted, that's hard to accept at first, but Milia trusted the protagonist and added, the professor went underground and opened the forbidden door. She described the ancient door made of metal, held shut by two massive round locks. My brother and the professors witnessed the professor's power with their own eyes. Argus looked at his sister in surprise at that revelation. She smiled and repeated the question, leaving her brother momentarily speechless. Jin explained, I slept deep beneath this kingdom for a very long time. The reason I came to the capital is to gather information about this era. The guild master asked what kind of information he was seeking. He answered there were two things. First, about the corruptors, the threat he needed to understand better. He revealed, these creatures existed 100 million years ago. Everyone was even more shocked. But they shouldn't be alive in this era. Argus asked why. He explained it was thanks to the spirits. 100 million years ago, the spirits spread across the world and maintained balance. They activated a gigantic energy tower that radiated purifying power. Energy shot into the sky, forming brilliant blue beams that covered the planet. From beyond the cosmos, the energy spread over the globe like a rain of light. Corruptors can only live in polluted places, overflowing with negative energy. But the spirits have the power to purify the environment, making it impossible for them to survive. The guild master wondered, why are they appearing in this era? Jin admitted he didn't know the details, but pulled something from his pocket. Holding the blue cube, he projected a hologram of his friend. The friend said, the corruptor has evolved. The guild master gasped. Is this technology from an ancient civilization? He was curious about how the system worked, but Jin couldn't explain. The white-haired man said, that's why I came to the royal capital. I want to learn how people of this era deal with monsters, and whether there are records. The guild master asked about the second part. He answered, clues about the laboratories. He's been searching for labs scattered across the world, but keeping their power a secret. In the end, he affirmed, no matter what, I have only one goal. With determined eyes, he declared, wipe the corruptors off this world. After his explanation, the room fell silent. The guild master said, this sounds pretty far-fetched. Argus agreed, but smiled, I believe it. After all, we all want to fight monsters. The armored man advised him not to tell this story to anyone else. Jin grinned confidently. I know people will think I've gone mad. Argus asked the guild master for his opinion. He replied, if you believe him, so do I. Besides, someone with ill intent wouldn't risk saving an entire castle. The tension in the room instantly eased. The three seemed to reach an agreement. At that moment, the maid and the boy entered, apologizing for the interruption. The girl announced, the time has come. The blonde Argus asked, is it time already? He smiled and turned to the hero and the servant. Prepare to go. The white-haired young man was slightly flustered, but agreed. Some time later, the carriage wheels spun wildly. The carriage raced along the road, toward the royal family's magnificent castle. Inside the carriage, Jin looked out the window, thinking, I'm about to meet this country's royalty. He was wearing a neat suit, and wondered if he should change. Argus praised, the suit suits you. The guild master nodded in agreement. The girls complimented his look, though he found the clothes a bit restrictive. Hardin explained, the person you're about to meet is the first prince acting on behalf of the king. He said they needed to keep up appearances. Jin thought to himself how bothersome the whole thing was. As the carriage approached the gate, he just hoped there wouldn't be any more trouble. Inside the castle, ranks of armored knights stood in formation to welcome them. Many different races made up the royal guard, each one excellent. The group entered the throne hall. Artistes proclaimed, I have brought the nation's savior. From afar, an authoritative voice from the throne called out, raise your heads. The three knelt to show their respect. The white-haired man lifted his head and finally looked straight at the person on the throne, studying him closely. On the throne sat the first prince, Tails Kamoja, exuding utmost dignity and confidence. He introduced himself as Jin Shido. The prince merely snorted. The prince spoke for his ailing father, expressing the kingdom's gratitude for what you did. He noted, I heard from Argus that you come from the small village of Kodama. With a mocking tone, he sneered. Who would have thought someone so powerful came from such a tiny place? With a dark smile, the prince said bluntly, I'll be direct with you. Without beating around the bush, the prince ordered, become my loyal knight and obey me. Become a holy knight and devote yourself to the country. The prince's command echoed through the grand throne hall, and the atmosphere instantly turned suffocating and unbearable. With eyes glowing red, he repeated the order with utter arrogance. Jin was clearly displeased by the offer. A flash of anger crossed his face. The prince noticed the silence and asked, is there a problem? I haven't heard your answer. Hardin tried to intervene, reminding them that they were the ones who summoned the hero here. He advised the prince not to speak in such a coercive manner. But Jin cut in. I have no intention of staying in this country long. The prince said he'd heard Jin was working at the academy. Jin confirmed it was only temporary. He asked bluntly, is that a refusal? Jin replied, yes, and I apologize for that. In a serious tone, the prince said, then there is no other choice. The guards moved immediately. Castle knights drew their swords, ready to strike at any moment. The prince ordered, seize the white-haired one. Hardin tried to stop them in horror, but was restrained by the guards. The prince revealed, this warrior is suspected of plotting to overthrow the nation. The hall gasped. He explained that a corruptor had been hidden behind the academy's ancient door. Since they said you opened the door, suspecting you was only natural. With a vicious smile, the prince suggested, perhaps this, saving the country, was just a performance. The guild master fumed. This accusation is ridiculous and extreme. Jin remained silent as a dozen weapons were pointed at him. The prince said, if you agree to serve me, I'll overlook the suspicion. With a sinister grin, he repeated, since you refuse, there is no other option. Argus thought to himself, he's only been in the city a short time. I'm the one who asked him to investigate the academy, and I already warned you. He glanced at the female knights sneering and realized they'd been deceived. They should have beefed up security. The commander of the 3rd Division and other knights were fanatically loyal to the first prince. The commander of the 4th Division, the Horned One, was also aligned with the nobles. The blonde knight understood perfectly. From the start, the plan was to eliminate the hero if he refused. The prince said, letting someone who can fell a giant monster run free is too dangerous. But with a dramatic flourish, he declared, I am merciful, so I will give you one last chance. With eyes blazing red, he commanded, swear fealty to me at once. Jin stayed silent, surrounded by knights with weapons aimed at him. With a serious expression, Jin said, I don't understand this situation. The prince blinked, confused. What do you mean? The tension in the room tightened. Jin explained, a verbal oath means nothing in this situation. He continued, if I just speak vows and then run off, the oath is worthless. Argus agreed that was true, but Jin kept provoking. With a sharp look, he said, it seems you want to force my words. He mulled over the true intent of the one on the throne. Do you merely crave control, or is there something else? The prince snapped, shut up. An angry knight shot back. Who do you think you're speaking to? With a sneer, Jin told him to listen carefully and grabbed the tip of the spear. With a swift motion, he channeled force into the weapon, startling the soldiers. The Horned Knight asked what was happening, not understanding Jin's power. Before he could grasp it, the large man's body was hoisted into the air, and then harshly hurled aside by the protagonist. The prince froze in horror, unable to believe what was happening. The blonde knight clutched his head in frustration at the chaos that erupted. The commander of the 3rd Division, furious, tried to use spirit magic against Jin. But the magic didn't activate, and she ordered the other guards to seize him. Jin easily blocked a guard's spear thrust, then kicked hard, sending the soldier flying with a thunderous crash. Jin maintained a calm stance, exerting no visible effort. Next, a powerful gust of air blasted the remaining knights away. The blonde prince went berserk, ordering the immediate attack on the insolent man. He even commanded Argus to join in beating the traitor. The armored youth drew his sword, while the guild master watched in silence. But the wolf-eared youth hesitated, sweating cold at facing his friend. The prince chuckled savagely. "I don't care if the target is eliminated." A host of soldiers rushed at Jin, determined to capture him at all costs. At that moment, the silver-haired man focused brilliant blue magical energy throughout his body. Then the protagonist's body suddenly vanished, causing every attack aimed at him to fail. Yet his voice still echoed through the hall. "Letting someone of that level roam free is dangerous. But if I truly wanted to, flattening this city would be ridiculously easy. The reason I don't is because I stand with the people. I'm here to protect the lives of those who live now. However, I do have exceptions. To cruel villains who scorn human life, I show no mercy. So which of the two are you, Kamoja?" The prince froze in terror, realizing his life was in this man's hands. The captain pointed his sword at him in fury, asking if he knew what he was doing. Jin confirmed, saying he was resisting someone trying to force something utterly unreasonable. At that moment, the Horned Knight, collapsing, asked if he intended to oppose the entire nation. The silver-haired young man denied it. Facing his enemies, he said seriously, "You're the ones doing that." The guild master listened tensely as Jin explained, "I will respect the true royal family, but I'll only help if this country's rules are fair and the demands are reasonable." The commander listened intently as the protagonist warned, "I'm not so cheap as to silently accept everything." The wounded soldier angrily heard him say that if they tried to force him, don't blame him for fighting back. "First, I want to ask you a question." He leaned close to the prince's ear and asked, "Do you think everything will always go your way?" The blonde prince began to sweat as that terrifying voice asked whether he was something more. At that moment, Jin's eyes flashed blue, emanating an extremely dreadful magical power. However, the great doors of the hall suddenly opened, drawing the captain's and everyone's attention. Graceful footsteps echoed. A mysterious voice commented, "I've heard the whole story." With a gentle smile, a beautiful silver-haired girl entered and asked, "May I join the conversation?" The graceful girl walked into the throne hall, passing guards who were completely motionless. Seeing the newcomer, the horned beastman was astonished and respectfully called for Princess Charlotte. The blonde knight breathed a sigh of relief, glad the girl arrived in time to help. Argus thought to himself, "Now let the second princess finish this." Charlotte smiled amiably and teased her brother, "You look like you're having fun." The prince glared at his sister with fury, calling her name in a tone of contempt. He was clearly extremely annoyed by the unexpected intervention. He looked toward Argus and realized what was going on. The princess reproached her brother, "You should have invited me to the meeting." With a sarcastic smile, she reminded him, "You're not even our father's official representative." The prince gritted his teeth in anger at his sister's taunt. He retorted that, unfortunately, the other man wasn't a true hero. The prince accused him of being a criminal daring to oppose the royal family. The captain confirmed and said he had wounded the knight commander, but the princess countered, "Wasn't it because he behaved rudely first?" The horned commander defended himself. "That silver-haired one tried to harm the first prince." The silver-haired princess asked, "Wasn't he just standing behind your brother?" She smiled at Jin and asked, "Right." Jin agreed and explained he only approached to ask one question. The princess looked at her brother. "That's what the young man just said." She taunted, "Will you call someone a criminal over something this stupid?" The prince trembled with rage, unable to refute his sister's argument. The princess turned back to Jin and called his full name. With a graceful bow, she said, "I won't demand you serve this country like a slave. I ask you to help as a friend." Jin smiled at the offer. The silver-haired princess smiled happily and thanked him for agreeing. She suggested moving the conversation elsewhere, since this wasn't the right place. With an authoritative gesture, she ordered the knights to escort her new friend. The captain and soldiers obeyed, making way for Jin to pass. The prince stared with boiling rage, utterly powerless. After a while, the carriage departed the castle. The blonde said, "You scared me to death." He asked why the silver-haired man did that. Jin replied, "Just a little." Actually, he felt a strange aura from the prince and hoped it was just his imagination. But deep down, he knew that malevolence was real and worrying. He then glanced at the princess and thanked her for rescuing him. The princess smiled. "No need to thank me, you already helped us earlier." She apologized for her brother, but Jin said it was unnecessary. With a smile, the girl reintroduced herself. "I'm Charlotte, the second princess." She asked Jin to continue helping as a friend and he agreed. Argus wondered about the prince's attitude, but she didn't know the exact reason. She revealed her brother was very ambitious and full of plans for the future. He intends to start wars to expand territory as soon as he ascends the throne. From that, Jin realized the prince considered him a major obstacle to those plans. The princess vowed she wouldn't let relatives interfere in their lives anymore. She said Hardin had reported everything to their father, who lay ill in his room. She also revealed she had no intention of ceding the throne to her brother. With a serious, determined look, she asked Jin if he really trusted her. The white-haired young man smiled and replied, yes. In the carriage, Argus asked where they were going and why the princess was coming along. She explained it would be rude to summon the savior without giving a reward. She also remarked that he was staying at a modest inn. The group arrived. The princess looked thrilled about the upcoming surprise. With a radiant smile, she said, we've prepared a special gift for the hero. Jin gaped in astonishment at the sight before him. The gift the princess mentioned turned out to be an enormous, magnificent mansion. She smiled and announced, from now on, this house officially belongs to you. Use it as you wish. Everyone opened the doors and stepped inside. The grand hall was so lavish that Jin couldn't help exclaiming, this place is ridiculously opulent. He looked at Princess Charlotte skeptically. Can I really accept such a huge gift? His expression made Charlotte chuckle. Of course, it originally belonged to a count, but it has been vacant for a long time. Hearing that, Jin asked curiously, belong to a count? What if he comes back to claim it? Then he saw Charlotte's wicked smile and hurriedly added, never mind, I'm overthinking. Still, he was a bit uneasy. But suddenly gifting an entire mansion like this is a little. Before he could finish, the knight Argus interrupted. This is just to show how much we value your abilities. Just move in, don't hesitate at all, because this house is yours now. And so the group began touring the mansion from top to bottom. After a while, Jin stroked his chin and nodded. I get it, but it seems a bit much for just one person. Even the bedroom is this cavernous. Beside him, Argus laughed heartily. If that's the case, I'll arrange some servants to manage the place for you. They'll be more than happy to serve anyway. The protagonist didn't agree immediately but countered, are you sure? For that, Argus replied cheerfully, I owe you a huge favor. But if you don't mind, may I ask one more favor? Jin asked curiously. What favor? Time passed quickly. The scene shifted to Team 7's special training yard. Here, the soldiers were energetically training together. Even Karina was sparring with a team member. When the opponent lunged to attack, her gaze instantly sharpened. She thrust her wooden spear forward to block the blow, then flicked it so hard the opponent's weapon flew into the air. Finally, she pointed the spear's tip right at his face. He panicked and begged for mercy. I yield. At that moment, applause broke out. A fresh green-haired girl smiled and approached to praise. You're improving fast, Karina. Karina replied flatly, I still have a lot to work on. She reminded herself of yesterday's mess. She only handled a few weak lackeys while the memory of Jin fighting the giant monster alone returned. That made Karina furious at herself. Why could someone else pull off such an extraordinary feat? Thinking that, she yelled in frustration, damn it, isn't the next opponent coming? Just then a team member ran over shouting, Captain, Miss Charlotte has arrived. Not far away, Argus and Princess Charlotte were standing. Seeing everyone pause, Argus said with a smile, carry on with your training. On the other side, when Karina saw Jin's figure, her expression immediately darkened. She gritted her teeth, thinking irritably, what the hell is he doing here? Unaware of her thoughts, the third knight respectfully said, this way, Princess Charlotte. After everyone sat down, Jin turned and asked, so what do you want me to do? Argus laughed. You've come all this way, surely you can guess. Jin stood and looked toward the knight's training, then asked to be sure. You want me to train them? The knight nodded. Exactly. You must have seen the Prince Tailey's arrogant, contemptuous attitude earlier. Prince Tailey's and Princess Charlotte are locked in a fierce struggle for the throne. We can't predict what tricks he'll use. The only ones who can loyally protect Princess Charlotte are our Team 7. No one knows when danger will strike. So I want you to train them, get them ready for that day. Hearing this, Jin fell silent and watched ahead, thinking to himself, their skills are pretty decent already. They've been training diligently every single day. The sight of soldiers training, until drenched in sweat, brought back old memories. Over 100 million years ago, I was the same. To become an official agent of the nation, he had to train insanely hard. Back in the present, Knight Argus stepped forward and shouted, everyone gather here at once. Today, to raise the quality of training, we've invited a national hero as a special instructor. He'll point out the flaws we need to fix. Clear? Everyone shouted in unison. Yes, sir. Jin narrowed his eyes slightly, watching everything. He thought to himself, teaching the obedient is easy, but the stubborn ones are a bit of a headache. He stepped forward and announced, first, I want to test everyone's stamina. Everyone, run around the training ground perimeter for me. The first to object was Karina. What? We do that every day. No need for this redundant stamina test. She pointed at Jin with an angry look. You came here just to make us do chores like this. Seeing that, someone nearby hurried to stop her, and Argus wanted to speak up too. However, Jin raised a hand to stop him. I apologize for earlier. If so, let's change the approach a bit. Saying that, he took off his outer coat, walked to the weapon rack and said, This sounds more fun. Your weapon is a spear, right? Karina, not understanding but nodding, said, Yes. Jin immediately grabbed a spear, pointed it at her and said, Try to stab me once. No time limit. If you touch me even once, the running exercise will be cancelled. Nobody wants to be schooled by someone weaker than them. Hearing Jin's bold declaration, Karina asked with interest, But do you even know how to use a spear? Don't worry, Jin said as he flourished the spear with remarkable skill, leaving Karina and everyone around astonished. He quickly caught the spear as it dropped and confidently declared, There's no weapon in this world I can't use.